The first time Daniel laughed at my business idea, I thought it was just his way of showing concern. The fifth time, I recognized it for what it truly was: contempt. "Scented candles, Becky? That's your big plan to quit your job?" His voice carried that familiar mocking tone as he loosened his designer tie. "Everyone and their mother sells candles on Etsy. It's a hobby, not a business." I continued carefully measuring the soy wax flakes, keeping my voice steady despite the sting of his words. "This isn't just about candles, Dan. It's a complete home fragrance concept. Sustainable materials, custom scent profiles, local partnerships." He chuckled, that dismissive sound I'd grown to dread during our 8 years of marriage. "Whatever helps you sleep at night. Just don't touch the vacation fund when it inevitably fails." I didn't respond as he disappeared upstairs to change, leaving his briefcase from Pinnacle Financial Group on our kitchen counter. A not-so-subtle reminder of what a real career looked like. As a senior investment director, Daniel never missed an opportunity to highlight the gap between his six-figure salary and my middle school art teacher income. What he didn't know then, what neither of us could have predicted, was that 3 years later, my little hobby would own the very building where he worked. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It all started to unravel the night of Daniel's promotion. Party. Pinnacle had named him Regional Executive Director, and the celebration at the Lakeside Country Club was exactly what you'd expect. Expensive champagne, insincere congratulations, and endless discussion of market projections. I wore the black dress he'd selected, smiled at all his colleagues' spouses, and played the supportive wife role I'd perfected over the years. "You should see what Daniel's done for my business," Olivia Palmer gushed to the small group gathered near the bar. "My designs were just sketches until he saw their potential. Now I'm opening my first boutique next month." I'd met Olivia several times at company functions, a willowy blonde fashion designer who'd recently launched a clothing line with backing from Pinnacle's small business initiative. She was talented, certainly, but something about Daniel's enthusiastic support for her entrepreneurial vision made my stomach tighten. Daniel's always had an eye for promising ventures. Michael Reynolds, Daniel's boss, raised his glass to recognizing untapped potential. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just that morning, Daniel had accidentally knocked over one of my prototype candles, complaining about craft supplies taking over the house. For 2 years, I'd been creating my products in our garage after school hours, slowly building a loyal customer base at local farmers markets and through word of mouth. I'd asked Daniel twice about applying for Pinnacle's small business program, and twice he'd dismissed the idea as not the kind of business they fund. Yet here was Olivia, beaming with gratitude for Daniel's corporate backing. Later that evening, I was searching for Daniel to tell him I was ready to leave when I overheard his voice coming from the terrace. I paused before rounding the corner. "You worry too much," he was saying quietly. "Becky suspects nothing. She's too busy playing with her little candles. And if she finds out?" Olivia's voice. "She won't. Besides, what would she do? She can't even support herself without my income." I didn't confront them that night. Instead, I returned home with Daniel, listening to him boast about his promotion while something hardened inside me. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that I'd allowed myself to become exactly what he thought I was: dependent, unambitious, content with crumbs of respect. The following morning, I called the one person I knew would understand. Jennifer Garcia had been my college roommate before building a successful chain of wellness centers across 3 states. We'd stayed close over the years, despite Daniel's thinly veiled disdain for her aggressive business tactics. "I need your advice," I said when she answered, my voice steadier than I expected. And possibly alone. Jen's downtown office felt like stepping into another world, modern, purposeful, alive with possibility. floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city where somewhere, in a similar building, Daniel was probably meeting with Olivia to discuss fabric swatches or whatever their relationship actually involved. So he's cheating, financially supporting her business, and belittling yours, Jen summarized after I'd explained everything. What exactly are you planning to do? I'm not sure, I admitted. Divorce him, obviously, but that's not enough. Revenge? Jen raised an eyebrow. Justice, I corrected. I want him to realize what he dismissed. I want to succeed so thoroughly that he can't ignore it. Jen considered me for a long moment. Most people would just key his car. I'm not most people. She smiled then, a slow, approving smile that reminded me of why we'd been friends for 15 years. No, you're not. That's why this is going to work. For the next 2 hours, we mapped out a strategy that would transform Hearth and Home, Essentials, my little hobby, into something Daniel could never have imagined. Jen agreed to invest as a silent partner, but with conditions. I would formalize my business plan, secure a dedicated production space, and commit to treating this as more than a side gig. One more thing, she said, as I prepared to leave. This building, Riverview Tower, houses several Pinnacle offices, including Daniel's, right? I nodded, confused by the sudden change in topic. Interesting. She made a note on her tablet. Never hurts to understand the terrain. I didn't realize then that she was already thinking 10 moves ahead. Armed with Jen's investment and my own renewed determination, I filed for divorce the following week. Daniel's reaction cycled predictably through disbelief, anger, and finally, contempt. You're making a mistake, he warned as he packed his things, moving temporarily to Olivia's apartment until the divorce was finalized. You think you can support yourself selling overpriced wax? I guess we'll find out, I replied, feeling strangely calm. You'll come crawling back within 6 months, he predicted, closing his suitcase with unnecessary force. When you do, don't expect the same terms. He left that afternoon, confident in his assessment of my capabilities and limitations, an assessment that had shaped our marriage for nearly a decade. What he failed to understand was how thoroughly his dismissal had liberated me. With Jen's backing, I leased a small commercial space on the edge of downtown. Nothing glamorous, but it included a retail storefront and enough production room to triple my output. I hired Sam Cooper, a recent business graduate with a passion for sustainable retail, and together we revamped my branding, expanded the product line, and developed a comprehensive online presence. The divorce proceedings dragged on, complicated by Daniel's attempts to minimize the marital assets he'd need to divide. I didn't fight him on most points: the house, the cars, his precious investment portfolio. My lawyer thought I was being too accommodating, not realizing that my focus had shifted entirely to building something of my own. 6 months after Daniel moved out, Hearth and Home Essentials was gaining serious traction. Our signature City Series candles, complex scent profiles inspired by different neighborhoods in Oak Ridge, had been featured in a popular lifestyle magazine. Online orders were steadily increasing, and we'd expanded to home goods beyond just fragrances. I was reviewing quarterly projections with Sam when my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Need to drop off final divorce papers. We'll stop by the shop tomorrow. Try to clear some time. The dismissive tone hadn't changed, though his circumstances had. Through carefully cultivated industry contacts, I'd learned that Daniel's affair with Olivia had become public knowledge at Pinnacle. While not enough to threaten his position, it had tarnished his carefully constructed image. More interestingly, Olivia's boutique had opened to considerable fanfare, backed by a substantial investment from Pinnacle's small business fund, shepherded, of course, by Daniel himself. When he arrived at my store the next day, I watched his expression carefully as he took in the stylish interior, the customers browsing our products, the unmistakable signs of a thriving business. This is more professional than I expected, he admitted reluctantly, glancing around. What did you expect? Crayon labels and mason jars? He didn't answer, instead handing me an envelope. The judge signed everything yesterday. It's official. Thank you for delivering these. I accepted the envelope without opening it. How are you managing all this? He asked, gesturing vaguely, around the store. His tone suggested genuine curiosity mingled with something else, concern that perhaps he'd miscalculated. Turns out I'm better at business than you thought. I smiled pleasantly. How's Olivia's boutique doing? His expression tightened. Fine. Busy. I'm sure. Starting a new business requires so much attention, so much investment. The implied knowledge of his financial backing made him shift uncomfortably. Well, congratulations on all this, he said stiffly. Glad it's working out for you. As he turned to leave, I couldn't resist one parting shot. By the way, Dan, I'm not coming crawling back, just so we're clear on the terms. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The look he gave me was worth every late night, every doubtful moment, every sacrifice of the past year. The following month saw Hearth and Home Essentials continue its upward trajectory. We expanded to a second location across town, and our online sales necessitated a dedicated fulfillment center. I brought on Emma Davis, a loyal customer with a background in supply chain management, as my business partner. Together, we refined our operations while maintaining the handcrafted quality that had become our signature. Occasionally, I would hear updates about Daniel and Olivia through mutual acquaintances. Her boutique was struggling despite the initial buzz, requiring additional funding that Daniel seemed increasingly reluctant to provide. Meanwhile, his position at Pinnacle had plateaued, not in jeopardy, but his prospects for further advancement had dimmed. Then came the opportunity that would change everything. I was meeting with Jen for our quarterly investment review when she slid a property prospectus across the table. What do you know about Riverview Tower? I frowned, confused. Just that it's one of the premium office buildings downtown. Pinnacle has their regional headquarters there. Why? It's coming up for sale, quietly, not on the open market. Jen tapped the document. The current owner is facing some financial difficulties and looking for a quick, discreet transaction. And this concerns us because commercial real estate in Oak Ridge is undervalued right now, and this is prime property. Her eyes held mine. And because I know a very motivated investor who might partner with us. That investor turned out to be Thomas Wilson, a commercial real estate developer who had been unsuccessfully pursuing Jen for years. His interest in Tizai's, the property was matched only by his interest in impressing her, making him surprisingly amenable to creating an investment structure that would include Hearth and Home Essentials as a significant equity partner. This is a major leap. I hesitated during our first meeting with Tom. Our business is doing well, but nothing on this scale. Sometimes the opportunity shapes the business, not the other way around, Tom replied. Your company has strong fundamentals and impressive growth. More importantly, Jennifer trusts your judgment. Over the next several weeks, we created a complex ownership structure. Tom would be the majority investor, with Jen's wellness company taking a 30% stake. Hearth and Home Essentials would hold 20%, a smaller percentage, but still significant, and backed by a favorable financing arrangement through Tom's banking connections. Most crucially, our agreement included a management clause giving us control over tenant relationships and lease renewals, including Pinnacle Financial Group's lease, which, coincidentally, was coming up for review in 6 months. The acquisition closed quietly, with minimal publicity beyond commercial real estate circles. The existing property management team was retained, and most tenants remained unaware of the ownership change, including, notably, Daniel. I didn't intentionally cross paths with him during this period, though I did tour the building several times with Tom and the management team, carefully scheduling these visits for times when Daniel would likely be in meetings. Occasionally, I would spot Olivia entering or leaving the building, looking progressively more stressed as the months passed. Through Patty Adams, Daniel's executive assistant, who had always been kind to me during our marriage, I learned that Olivia's boutique was on the verge of closing. The Pinnacle Small Business Fund was pulling its support after disappointing sales, leaving her with substantial debt. Daniel, meanwhile, was facing increasing scrutiny over his initial recommendation. For the investment, when the time came to review Pinnacle's lease, I recused myself from direct negotiations, allowing Tom to take the lead while I focused on our company's continuing expansion. We were now operating 4 retail locations, developing a wholesale division, and considering acquisition of a small complementary brand. Tom scheduled the Pinnacle lease renewal meeting for a Friday afternoon. I wasn't present, but he called me immediately after. "You should have seen his face," Tom laughed. I mentioned our ownership group includes Hearth and Home Essentials, and he went completely white. "Did he say anything?" "Asked if you were directly involved in the decision-making. I told him our investment partners typically take an active role in property management. I considered this. And the lease terms? Standard renewal offer, though we did include a modest rate increase in line with market conditions. Ball's in their court now." I nodded, though he couldn't see me through the phone. "Thank you, Tom." "My pleasure. Jennifer was right about you. You play the long game better than most." 3 days later, I received an email from Daniel requesting a meeting to discuss business matters of mutual interest. I agreed, suggesting the Rosewood Cafe, neutral territory with enough privacy for a sensitive conversation. He arrived precisely on time, looking more haggard than I remembered. The confident swagger had dimmed, replaced by a wary defensiveness I'd never seen in him before. "You look well," he offered as he sat down across from me. "Thank you. You look tired." He didn't deny it. "It's been a challenging quarter." "I've heard. How's Olivia?" A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. "We're taking some space. Her business situation has been stressful." "I imagine so. Startups are difficult, especially when the initial backing falls through." He met my gaze directly for the first time. "You know about Riverview Tower?" It wasn't a question. "Yes, I do." "Are you behind the new lease terms?" I sipped my coffee before answering. "I'm part of the ownership group, if that's what you're asking. The terms were set by our management team based on current market rates." "This is about revenge, then." His tone hardened, punishing me by going after my company. "Not everything is about you, Daniel." I set my cup down carefully. Riverview Tower is a sound investment with excellent long-term appreciation potential. Pinnacle is just one of 17 tenants. A tenant whose lease you now control. A tenant whose lease is being renewed at standard market rates, I corrected. "If you're concerned about the terms, I'm sure Tom would be happy to discuss alternatives." Daniel studied me, searching for something. Weakness, perhaps, or the hurt, accommodating woman he'd dismissed so easily. He wouldn't find her. "You've changed," he finally said. "No, you just never saw me clearly." His phone buzzed, and he checked it with a frown. "I need to get back to the office. Michael wants to discuss our response to the lease proposal." As he stood to leave, I remained seated. "Daniel?" He paused, looking down at me. "Those candles you laughed at? They generated 7 figures in revenue last quarter. Just thought, you should know." The expression that crossed his face was worth every moment of doubt, every dismissive comment, every night I'd spent wondering if I was making a mistake. 2 weeks later, Pinnacle signed the renewed lease agreement without further negotiation. I heard through industry channels that they'd evaluated other properties but found nothing comparable in the current market. Daniel's position had been further compromised by the Olivia situation, leaving him with minimal leverage to argue against the renewal. 6 months after that, I opened our flagship store on the ground floor of Riverview Tower, prime retail space that became available when an underperforming tenant failed to renew. The location offered excellent visibility and foot traffic, particularly from the building's professional occupants, including, of course, Pinnacle's employees. On opening day, I stood at the entrance, greeting customers and accepting congratulations from well-wishers. Jen arrived with an extravagant flower arrangement and her typical blunt assessment. "You did it, Becky. From garage hobbyist to commercial property owner in 3 years. Not bad." I hugged her tightly. "I couldn't have done it without you." "You would have found another way," she insisted. "You just needed someone to believe in you until you believed in yourself." Late that afternoon, as the opening day crowd thinned, I noticed Daniel standing across the atrium, watching the activity, in our store. Our eyes met briefly before he turned and walked toward the elevators, shoulders straight, but somehow diminished. I felt no triumph in that moment, no vindictive satisfaction. Just a quiet certainty that I was exactly where I was, meant to be, building something meaningful and lasting, surrounded by people who recognized my value. That night, alone in my new downtown apartment with its view of the city lights, I reflected on the journey. The pain of betrayal had faded, replaced by gratitude for the awakening it had triggered. Daniel's dismissal of my dreams had ultimately forced me to defend them, first to him, then to myself, and finally to the world. Sometimes the people who believe in you least are the ones who motivate you most. And sometimes, the sweetest success is the kind no one sees coming. Not even you. The Monday after our flagship store opening, I arrived early to oversee a shipment of our new summer collection. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Riverview Tower's lobby, illuminating our shopfront with its elegant sage green awning and gold lettering. 6 months ago, I would have felt like an imposter standing here. Now, I strode through the revolving doors with the confidence of someone who belonged. "Morning, Ms. Mitchell," called the security guard at the central desk. "Beautiful display you've got there." "Thanks, Ray. How was your weekend?" "Can't complain. My wife loves those pillow sprays you sent over. Says she's sleeping better than she has in years." I smiled, making a mental note to send him samples from our new relaxation line. These small connections mattered, not just for business, but because they anchored me to the real world beyond balance sheets and growth projections. Inside our flagship store, Emma was already arranging displays, her methodical precision a perfect complement to my creative instincts. We'd become an effective team over the past year, her operational expertise filling gaps in my business knowledge while I handled product development and brand vision. The summer collection arrived. She gestured toward several boxes stacked neatly in our back room. And Tom Wilson called. He wants to discuss expanding our space to include the vacant corner unit. Did he mention a timeline? He's thinking, next quarter, after the current tenant vacations are finalized. Oh, and the flowers arrived. She nodded toward an elaborate arrangement on the front counter. I checked the card. "Congratulations on the new flagship. Here's to continued success. JG." Jen's support remained unwavering, though she'd stepped back from day-to-day involvement as our business stabilized. She'd become more mentor than partner, offering guidance when needed, but trusting my decisions. "We should also discuss the partnership offer from Woodland Apothecary," Emma continued, checking items off her ever-present tablet. "Their organic body care line would complement our products without direct competition." As we reviewed the morning's agenda, my attention was momentarily drawn to a familiar figure passing our storefront, Daniel, arriving for work in Pinnacle's offices 30 floors above us. He glanced in, our eyes meeting briefly before he quickened his pace toward the elevators. These fleeting encounters had become routine, awkward moments of recognition in a building we now shared from vastly different positions. I turned back to Emma, pushing thoughts of Daniel aside. Let's meet with Woodland next week. I want to see their production facilities before making any decisions. The morning unfolded with the controlled chaos of retail, checking inventory, assisting customers, finalizing orders for our other locations. Around noon, I retreated to my small office behind the retail space to review quarterly projections when Sam knocked on the door. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his usually composed expression uncharacteristically unsettled. "There's someone asking for you, Olivia Palmer." My stomach tightened. I hadn't seen Olivia since before the divorce, though I'd heard her boutique had closed permanently 2 months ago. "Send her back," I said, closing my laptop. Best to face this directly. Moments later, Olivia appeared in my doorway, a striking contrast to the confident woman I remembered from Daniel's promotion party. Her designer clothes looked slightly worn, her polished appearance fraying at the edges. But what struck me most was the absence of the superior smile she'd always worn in my presence. "Rebecca," she began awkwardly. "Thank you for seeing me. What can I do for you, Olivia?" I kept my tone neutral, neither hostile nor welcoming. She hesitated, then sat in the chair opposite my desk. "I need a job." Of all the things I'd expected her to say, this wasn't on the list. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. "I know this is unconventional," she continued, her voice strained. "But my boutique failed. I'm drowning in debt. And no one in fashion will touch me after the Pinnacle investment disaster. And you thought I would hire you?" I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. "After everything with Daniel?" Her eyes flashed briefly with old defiance before dimming again. "Because of everything with Daniel. You, of all people, understand what it's like to be underestimated. By him." That landed differently than I expected. Not as manipulation, but as a genuine admission. Still, I wasn't about to be swayed by one moment of apparent self-awareness. "What happened between you and Daniel?" She looked away, studying the framed press features on my wall. "He pulled the additional funding I needed, said the initial investment was sufficient, and I should be profitable by now. When the boutique failed, he said it proved I wasn't serious about business." Her laugh was brittle. "Sound familiar?" It did, painfully so. The same dismissive judgment, the same moving goalposts, the same casual cruelty disguised as hard truth. "That doesn't explain why you're here, Olivia." She met my gaze directly. "Because you succeeded where I failed. Because you built something real while I was chasing validation through a man who sees women as either decorations or inconveniences. And because I have nowhere else to go." I studied her, searching for signs of insincerity. What I saw instead was exhaustion and defeat, the accumulated weight of consequences Olivia hadn't believed would apply to her. "What skills do you bring? To a home fragrance company? Your background is in fashion design." "I have a degree in marketing I never used because designing was more glamorous. I understand retail merchandising, luxury consumer psychology, and brand positioning." She straightened slightly. "And I'm willing to start at the bottom." The practical part of my brain warned against mixing business with this complicated personal history. Yet another part, the part that remembered my own desperate need for a second chance, hesitated to dismiss her outright. "I'll need to think about it and talk to my team." Relief softened her features slightly. "That's fair. Thank you for considering it." As she stood to leave, curiosity got the better of me. "Are you and Daniel still together?" Her expression hardened. "No." He made it clear my business failure reflected poorly on his judgment. Apparently, I was a worthwhile investment only when I was succeeding. After she left, I sat at my desk, turning the conversation over in my mind. Hiring Olivia would be complicated at best, reckless at worst. Yet something about her desperation felt genuine and familiar. Before I could overthink it, I texted Jen. "Olivia Palmer just asked me for a job. Thoughts?" Her response came quickly. "Terrible idea or brilliant revenge. No middle ground. Either way, I support your decision." Typical Jen, both helpful and entirely unhelpful at the same time. That evening, I stayed late reviewing applications for our expanding production team. The building had quieted, most offices emptying as workers headed home. I was gathering my things to leave when a knock on the glass storefront startled me. Daniel stood outside, his expression unreadable in the dimming light. I hesitated before unlocking the door. "We're closed." "I know. I need to talk to you." Against my better judgment, I let him in. "If this is about Olivia coming here today, it's about a lot of things." He looked around the store, taking in the displays, the subtle branding, the evident success. "You've done well. I didn't need your validation then. I certainly don't need it now." He nodded, accepting the rebuke. "Olivia told me she asked you for a job. Your point? I wanted to warn you, she's using you to get to me." I laughed, genuinely amused by his persistent self-centeredness. "Not everything is about you, Daniel. She came here because she's desperate and I represent success in an industry adjacent to hers. You can't trust her," he insisted. "She'll say anything to get what she wants." "You would know," I replied evenly. "You funded her business while belittling mine, had an affair with her while married to me, then abandoned her when her business struggled. If anyone has trust issues here, it's Olivia." His jaw tightened. "I came here as a courtesy. What you do with my warning is up to you." As he turned to leave, I found myself asking the question that had lingered since our divorce. "Why did you never believe in my business, Daniel? You supported Olivia's boutique from day one, but you treated mine like a joke. What was the difference?" He paused, hand on the door. For a moment, I thought he might leave without answering. "Her business made me look good," he finally said. "Backing a fashion designer gave me cultural cachet at Pinnacle. Your candle company didn't." The stark honesty was somehow worse than any rationalization I'd imagined. My value to Daniel had always been measured by how I reflected on him. When that reflection didn't enhance his image, I became irrelevant. "Thank you for your honesty," I said quietly. "Now I need to close up." After he left, I sat alone in the darkened store, surrounded by products born from creativity he'd dismissed and determination he'd underestimated. His warning about Olivia kept circling back, not because I believed it, but because it revealed more about him than about her. The next morning, I called Olivia. "I have a 3-month contract position in our visual merchandising department," I told her. "It's entry-level with potential for permanent placement based on performance. If you're serious about starting at the bottom, it's yours." Her pause conveyed both surprise and calculation. "When do I start?" "Monday. And Olivia? This is a business decision, not a personal one. I expect professionalism and results. My team knows nothing about our history, and I intend to keep it that way." "Understood. Thank you for the opportunity." When I shared my decision with Emma, she raised an eyebrow but supported it without question. One of the many reasons she'd become indispensable as a business partner. Sam was more skeptical, concerned about bringing someone with fashion background into our established aesthetic. What neither of them knew was the complicated personal dynamic underlying the hire. The following weeks brought unexpected developments. Olivia proved surprisingly dedicated, arriving early, staying late, and bringing fresh perspective to our visual presentations. Her understanding of luxury retail positioning helped refine our brand identity in ways I hadn't considered. Most surprisingly, she seemed genuinely interested in our products, asking thoughtful questions about ingredients and manufacturing processes. Your Oak Ridge Heights candle has notes that would work beautifully in a complimentary room spray, she suggested during a product development meeting. The cedarwood and bergamot combination is sophisticated enough to justify the premium price. Point. I found myself reevaluating my assumptions about her. Perhaps she had been serious about design, just misguided in her approach and unfortunate in her choice of business advisor. 6 weeks into Olivia's contract, I was reviewing expansion plans for our production facility when Tom Wilson called. "Rebecca, do you have a minute to discuss an interesting development?" "Of course." "I've been approached by a broker representing a significant international investment group. They're interested in acquiring Riverview Tower at a substantial premium above market value." I sat up straighter. "How substantial?" 35% above our purchase price, which, given we've owned it less than a year, is extraordinary, I finished for him. "What's the catch?" "That's just it. There doesn't seem to be one. The property fits their portfolio strategy, and they're flush with capital they need to deploy. Jen and I are inclined to consider it, but wanted your input given your personal connection to the building." Personal connection. A delicate way of acknowledging that Riverview Tower represented more than just financial investment to me. "I need time to think about it," I said finally. "Can we meet tomorrow to discuss details?" "Absolutely. My office, 10 a.m.? After hanging up, I walked to the window overlooking downtown Oak Ridge. Selling the tower would mean significant profit for our investment group, including Hearth and Home Essentials. It would provide capital for expansion, new product lines, perhaps even acquisition of complementary brands. The rational business decision was clear, yet something held me back. This building had become symbolic, not just of my business success, but of my personal reclamation. Walking through these doors each day reminded me of how far I'd come from the woman whose dreams Daniel had dismissed so carelessly. I was still contemplating the decision that evening when a text arrived from an unfamiliar number. "Need to talk about Pinnacle situation. Urgent. Patty Adams, Daniel's executive assistant." We'd been friendly during my marriage but hadn't spoken since the divorce. I called immediately. "Patty? It's Rebecca. What's going on?" "I shouldn't be telling you this," she began, her voice hushed. "But you were always kind to me, and this doesn't seem right." "What doesn't?" "Daniel found out about the potential sale of Riverview Tower. He's been in closed-door meetings with Michael Reynolds and the executive committee all day. They're planning something. I'm not sure what, but it involves leveraging Pinnacle's position as the anchor tenant to complicate the sale." My pulse quickened. "How would they do that?" "I don't have details, but I overheard Daniel say something about making sure she doesn't profit from this. I think he meant you." After thanking Patty for the warning, I immediately called Jen and Tom, relaying the information. Tom's legal background kicked in immediately. "Their options are limited by the lease terms," he noted, "but they could potentially create complications by threatening early termination, challenging building management practices, or other disruptive actions. None would likely succeed, but they could delay the sale or spook the buyers." "So Daniel's trying to sabotage the deal out of spite," Jen summarized. "Classic." "Not just spite," I corrected. "Control. He can't stand that I've succeeded without him, and especially that I now have influence over his professional environment." "The question is how to proceed." Tom redirected the conversation. "Do we alert the potential buyers to Pinnacle's potential interference? Accelerate the sale process? Or take a more direct approach with Pinnacle's executive committee?" I considered our options carefully. "Let's meet with the potential buyers tomorrow as planned. I'll update you before then with my decision about the sale." That night, I barely slept, weighing the financial opportunity against the personal satisfaction of maintaining ownership. By morning, I'd reached a decision that felt right on multiple levels. The meeting with the potential buyers represented by a polished real estate director from a Singapore-based investment firm, went smoothly. Tom presented the property details while I explained our ownership structure and management philosophy. When they inquired about Pinnacle Financial Group as the anchor tenant, I addressed it directly. "We have a complex history with Pinnacle's leadership," I acknowledged. "My former husband is their regional executive director. We've maintained strictly professional landlord-tenant relations, but you should be aware there may be attempts to complicate this transaction." The director nodded appreciatively. "We value transparency. Such situations are not uncommon in our portfolio." After they departed, Tom looked at me questioningly. "So you've decided to sell?" "Not exactly." I slid a folder across the table. "I'd like to propose a restructuring of our ownership agreement." The plan I'd developed overnight was unorthodox, but potentially beneficial for all parties. Instead of selling the entire building, we would sell 70% to the international investors while maintaining a 30% ownership stake through a new limited partnership. Our flagship store would secure a long-term lease at favorable rates, and most importantly, we would retain primary management authority over the property, including tenant relations. This allows us to take significant profit while maintaining strategic control, I explained as Tom reviewed the proposal. The international group gets the property they want, while we continue to benefit from future appreciation and management fees. Tom studied the documents, impressed. "This is surprisingly sophisticated. Who helped you structure this?" "I may have consulted with Jen's real estate attorney at 2 a.m., I admitted. "What do you think?" "I think it's brilliant. It addresses everyone's objectives while neutralizing Pinnacle's potential interference." He closed the folder. "And I think Daniel severely underestimated your business acumen." The restructured deal proceeded rapidly, with the international investors accepting our counter-proposal with minimal adjustments. As we approached the closing date, I decided it was time to address the Pinnacle situation directly, not through Daniel, but through someone with actual authority. Michael Reynolds, Pinnacle's regional president, and Daniel's boss, agreed to meet me for coffee at the Rosewood Cafe. Curious about the invitation from his executive's ex-wife, who now partially owned their office building. "I appreciate you making time, Mr. Reynolds," I began after we'd exchanged pleasantries. "Michael, please. And I've been wanting to meet the woman behind Hearth & Home's impressive growth. Your products are excellent. My wife is particularly fond of your lakeside retreat collection." "Thank you." I noted the deliberate personal touch, a negotiation tactic I'd observed countless times during my marriage to Daniel. I wanted to discuss Riverview Tower's ownership restructuring and how it might affect Pinnacle. "I understand there's a sale pending," he replied carefully. "A partial sale. Our investment group is selling majority interest while maintaining management control. I wanted to assure you personally that Pinnacle's tenancy remains valued and secure." He studied me, clearly reassessing whatever preconceptions he'd formed. That's good to hear. There had been some concerns raised internally about potential disruption. "By Daniel," I stated directly. Michael didn't deny it. "He has expressed certain reservations about the building's management direction, based on personal history rather than professional assessment," I countered, "which puts Pinnacle in an awkward position of potentially making business decisions influenced by an executive's personal grievances." His expression confirmed my suspicion. Daniel had been pushing for action against the building ownership without fully disclosing his motivations. "Our new partnership structure includes significant international investment," I continued, "bringing greater resources for building improvements and tenant services. We're developing a 5-year capital improvement plan that would enhance Riverview's position as Oak Ridge's premier business address. We hope Pinnacle will continue to be the anchor tenant in that vision." Michael relaxed slightly. "That sounds promising. Perhaps we could review these plans once they're developed." "I'd welcome that. In fact, we're forming a tenant advisory committee to provide input on priority improvements. We'd value Pinnacle's participation through appropriate representation. The implication was clear. Pinnacle was welcome at the table, but not through Daniel. I'll make sure we have the right person involved, Michael agreed, understanding perfectly. When I returned to the store after the meeting, I found Olivia reorganizing our front display with a seasonal theme that cleverly highlighted our best sellers while introducing new products. "This looks wonderful," I acknowledged. "The color progression draws customers through the entire collection." That was the idea. She straightened, pushing hair from her face. "I wanted to create a narrative that makes the whole line feel cohesive rather than just individual products." "It works." I hesitated, then added, "Your contract is up next week. Emma and I have been discussing next steps." Something vulnerable flickered across her face before she composed herself. "And? We'd like to offer you a permanent position as our visual merchandising director, overseeing presentation across all locations." Relief washed over her features. Thank you. I've really come to believe in what you're building here." "You've earned it, Olivia. Your work speaks for itself." She hesitated, then said quietly, "I owe you an apology for everything with Daniel. I believed what he told me about you, that you weren't serious, that you were playing at business while he supported you. I never questioned it because it made me feel special that he saw potential in me instead. The admission wasn't something I'd expected or sought, but it settled something unresolved between us. We both made mistakes in trusting his judgment," I replied. "The difference is that you've learned from yours." The following week brought the closing of our restructured ownership deal. As the final documents were signed, I felt a profound sense of completion, not just of a business transaction, but of a personal journey. The young woman who had measured wax flakes in her garage while her husband mocked her dreams now controlled the building where he worked. To celebrate, Jen suggested dinner at Harborview Hotel, Oak Ridge's most exclusive restaurant. As we sipped champagne overlooking the city lights, she raised her glass. "To the most successful revenge in business history, building an empire while he wasn't looking." I shook my head, smiling. "It wasn't about revenge." "Not really." "No?" She arched an eyebrow skeptically. "It was about proving something to myself, not to him." I looked out at the cityscape, Riverview Tower prominently illuminated against the night sky. Though I won't pretend there isn't satisfaction in his daily reminder that he backed the wrong woman. Speaking of daily reminders, Jen set down her glass, suddenly serious. "There's something you should know. Michael Reynolds called Tom this afternoon. Pinnacle is restructuring their regional leadership. And Daniel? Reassigned to their Buffalo office, effective next month. Apparently, his judgment on several investment decisions has been questioned, starting with Olivia's boutique and extending to other ventures that haven't performed as projected." I absorbed this information, surprised by my lack of vindictive pleasure. Daniel's career setback felt disconnected from my own journey now, a parallel story rather than the climax of mine. "Do you know what finally convinced me to restructure the building ownership rather than sell outright?" I asked Jen. "I assumed it was to maintain some control over Daniel's work environment," she replied candidly. "That's what everyone would think. But the truth is simpler. I realized I didn't need to sell the building to prove I'd won, and I didn't need to keep it to punish Daniel. I needed to make the best business decision for Hearth and Home's future. Nothing more, nothing less." Jen smiled slowly. "That, my friend, is the difference between revenge and success. Revenge is about them. Success is about you." We clinked glasses to that distinction, and I felt the last weight of my marriage to Daniel finally lift away. He would move to Buffalo, continuing his career with diminished status. I would remain in Oak Ridge, building something meaningful that had long since outgrown its origins as a response to his dismissal. The candles he had mocked now illuminated homes across the country. The business he had belittled now partially owned the building where he had believed himself untouchable. But more importantly, the woman he had underestimated now recognized her own value, a victory more significant than any property deed could represent. As I walked through Riverview Tower's gleaming lobby the following morning, nodding to familiar faces and greeting tenants by name, I felt neither triumph nor resentment. Just the quiet confidence of someone who had found her place in the world, not through marriage or validation from others, but through believing in her own vision when no one else would. Sometimes the most powerful statement isn't made through words or dramatic gestures, but through steady, determined action. In creating something lasting from something dismissed, I had written my own story, one where the ending wasn't about getting even, but about moving forward. 1 year after the Riverview Tower ownership restructuring, I stood on the rooftop garden we'd installed as part of our building improvement plan, surveying downtown Oak Ridge in the golden light of a September sunset. The scent of lavender and rosemary from our newly planted herb section mingled with the crisp autumn air, creating a sensory experience that echoed our hearth and home philosophy, familiar comfort elevated by thoughtful details. The urban beekeeping installation is scheduled for next month, Tom Wilson explained as he joined me at the railing. The hospitality committee already has a waiting list for honey allocations among the tenants. I smiled, picturing the building's lawyers and financial analysts eagerly claiming their jars of rooftop honey, from sterile office tower to urban ecosystem. Not bad for 15 months of ownership. The sustainability initiatives have garnered significant industry attention, Tom agreed. 3 different commercial real estate publications have requested features on the transformation. What he didn't say, what neither of us needed to verbalize, was how thoroughly this vision differed from traditional corporate property management. The international investors who had purchased majority interest in Riverview Tower had initially viewed our community-focused approach with skepticism. Now they were highlighting it in presentations to their board, citing increased tenant satisfaction, decreased turnover, and the premium rental rates our upgraded building commanded. The quarterly reports look good, I noted, changing the subject to business. Tenant retention at 97%, waiting list for any vacancies, and the common area renovations coming in under budget. All credit to your management. Philosophy. Creating spaces people actually want to spend time in shouldn't be revolutionary. Yet here we are. Tom gestured toward the garden beds and comfortable seating areas where a handful of building employees lingered after work hours, enjoying the shared space. Pinnacle Financial Group had relocated their offices 3 months earlier, after Daniel's transfer to Buffalo. Michael Reynolds had been apologetic but direct when informing our management team of their decision. A consolidation of regional operations meant they needed less space in Oak Ridge. The official explanation made sense, but we all recognized the underlying truth. Pinnacle was extricating itself from a complicated situation involving their former executive and the building's co-owner. I hadn't minded. Their departure had allowed us to reimagine the 35th floor as a mixed-use innovation hub, currently home to 5 promising startups and a collaborative workspace that complemented our community building vision. Our event space booking calendar is filled through December, I told Tom as we moved toward the elevator. The holiday party inquiries started in August. Not surprising. Between the sunset views and your team's event packages, it's become the most sought-after venue in the business district. The event space had been Emma's inspiration, transforming an underutilized conference level into a flexible area that could host everything from corporate gatherings to wellness workshops. Hearth and Home provided signature scents, custom candle-making experiences, and ambiance design as premium add-ons that differentiated our offering from standard hotel ballrooms. The venture had been so successful that we were considering a separate events division. As we descended to the main floor, I checked my watch. I should get back to the store. We're finalizing the holiday collection launch tonight. How's Olivia working out as creative director? Tom asked casually as we exited the elevator. Surprisingly well. Her fashion background gives our seasonal transitions a cohesiveness they were lacking before. I hesitated, then added, she's actually pursuing a business degree part-time now. Says she wants to understand the fundamentals she missed the first time around. People can surprise you, Tom observed, when they're given the right opportunities. I thought about this as I walked through the lobby toward our flagship store. Olivia's transformation from Daniel's girlfriend to valued team member had been unexpected, not just professionally, but in what it revealed about second chances and human potential. The woman I'd once viewed as my replacement had become something far more interesting, a colleague with shared experience of the same man's dismissive judgment. Inside Hearth & Home, the pre-holiday energy was palpable. Staff arranged displays featuring our winter collection, rich with notes of cedar, pine, clove, and amber. The packaging this year incorporated sustainable materials with elegant gold accents, luxurious but conscientious, exactly the brand positioning we'd worked to establish. There you are, Emma called from near the register. The journalist from Home & Style magazine just confirmed for tomorrow morning. She wants to focus on the sustainable luxury angle and your journey as a female founder. I nodded, mentally preparing for another media interview. Our profile had risen considerably this past year, with features in several national publications and a growing social media presence. I'd become more comfortable with the founder narrative, though I still preferred discussing our products and philosophy rather than my personal story. Also, Sam called from the production facility. The custom order for Westbrook Hotels is complete and ready for delivery next week. He says it's our best work yet. The Westbrook chain had become our largest corporate client, ordering custom scent packages for their boutique hotels nationwide. What had begun as a small test in their Oak Ridge location had expanded to their entire 30-hotel portfolio, a validation of our ability to scale without compromising quality. Perfect. And the new diffuser prototypes? Arriving tomorrow. R&D says they've resolved the battery life issues. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed with a text from Jen. Check your email. Interesting proposition just came through. Excusing myself, I retreated to my office to find an email with the subject line, Acquisition Inquiry, Confidential. The sender was Campbell Fragrances, one of the largest home fragrance companies in the country. The message was brief, but direct. They were interested in discussing potential acquisition of Hearth & Home essentials and requested a confidential initial meeting. My immediate reaction was defensive. We'd built this company from nothing, weathered the startup challenges, established a loyal customer base and distinctive brand identity. The thought of being absorbed into a corporate giant felt wrong on a visceral level. Yet I knew enough about business to recognize that acquisition inquiries were a natural consequence of success. They had noticed us precisely because we were doing something right. I forwarded the email to Jen with a single question. Thoughts? Her response came within minutes. Flattering but suspicious. Why now? Let's discuss over dinner. Paolo's at 7? Jen's instincts for business machinations remained unparalleled. If she saw something concerning in the timing, it warranted investigation. I'll be there, I replied, then returned to the store floor to assist with final preparations for tomorrow's media visit. Later that evening, I settled into a corner booth at Paolo's with Jen. The familiar atmosphere of our favorite Italian restaurant, a welcome contrast to the day's surprising development. So Campbell Fragrances wants to buy you out, Jen stated, after ordering wine. Intriguing. Is it? They're the industry giant. We're the successful boutique brand. Isn't this the standard corporate playbook? Acquire the innovative smaller companies rather than competing with them? The playbook, yes. The timing is what interests me. Jen leaned forward. Have you heard of Meridian Brands? I shook my head. Private equity group specializing in consumer products. They've been quietly acquiring complementary lifestyle brands with strong regional presence and consolidating them into national platforms. Word is, they're building a premium home goods consortium to compete directly with the industry giants, including Campbell, I realized. So this could be a preemptive move, acquire us before Meridian can approach us. Exactly, which means there may be competing interests and therefore negotiating leverage. Jen smiled as the waiter delivered our wine. But the real question is, are you interested in selling at all? I considered this carefully. I haven't thought about exit strategies. We're still growing, still innovating. It feels premature. Not from a business life cycle perspective. You've proven the concept, established the brand, scaled operations, and demonstrated profitability. Many founders would consider this the optimal moment to capitalize on their creation. And what would you do? I asked, genuinely curious. Jen had built and sold 2 successful companies before her current wellness enterprise. I'd listen to both potential suitors before making any decisions. Information is leverage, and competing bidders are a founder's best friend. She sipped her wine thoughtfully. But that's me. You need to consider what Hearth and Home means to you beyond financial investment. What did it mean? The question lingered as I drove home that night. Hearth and Home had begun as a creative outlet, transformed into an act of self-determination during my divorce, and evolved into a thriving business that supported dozens of employees. The journey from Daniel's dismissal to industry recognition had reshaped my identity and purpose. Could I separate myself from the company I'd built? Should I? The following morning, I arrived early to prepare for the Home and Style interview, arranging product samples and reviewing key messaging points with our public relations consultant. As the journalist toured our space, asking thoughtful questions about our sustainable sourcing and manufacturing processes, I found myself seeing our achievements through fresh eyes: the cohesive brand identity, the loyal customer community, the positive workplace culture. What inspired you to focus on sustainable luxury? The journalist asked as we concluded the tour. It's such a specific niche within home fragrance. It aligned with my personal values, I replied. I believed consumers shouldn't have to choose between indulgence and responsibility. Our success proves there's significant demand for products that deliver both. And what's next for Hearth and Home? Any plans for expansion beyond your current product lines? The question, standard in such interviews, suddenly carried new weight given the Campbell inquiry. We're exploring several growth avenues, I answered, carefully. Our focus remains on mindful expansion that maintains our quality standards and brand integrity. After the journalist departed, I called an impromptu meeting with Emma and Olivia, my most trusted team members. Without revealing details of the acquisition inquiry, I posed a hypothetical question. If resources were unlimited, where would you take Hearth and Home next? Emma, ever practical, responded first. International distribution, starting with Canada and select European markets with established clean beauty infrastructure. Our sustainability ethos would resonate particularly well in Scandinavia and parts of Western Europe. Olivia's vision was more expansive. Full lifestyle integration. Home textiles, bath and body care, even furniture and decor with our signature aesthetic. Creating complete sensory environments rather than individual products. Their enthusiasm was contagious and clarifying. They saw Hearth and Home as a brand with significant unrealized potential that might be accelerated with the right resources but could be compromised under corporate ownership, prioritizing quarterly returns over long-term vision. After careful consideration, I responded to Campbell Fragrances, agreeing to a preliminary discussion while emphasizing that we weren't actively seeking acquisition. I also reached out to industry contacts, discreetly inquiring about Meridian, brand's recent activities without revealing our potential interest. The information that returned confirmed Jen's intelligence. Meridian was indeed assembling a portfolio of premium home goods brands, having recently acquired a high-end bedding company and an artisanal ceramic producer, both with values and aesthetics compatible with Hearth and Home. Their integration approach emphasized maintaining brand identity while providing expansion resources, a stark contrast to Campbell's reputation for absorbing acquisitions into their corporate structure. 2 days later, I received a direct email from Catherine Meridian, the private equity group's founder. Ms. Mitchell, I understand Campbell has expressed interest in Hearth and Home. Before you proceed with discussions, I'd appreciate the opportunity to share a different vision for partnership. Available for breakfast tomorrow at Harbor View? The directness was refreshing, as was the absence of corporate euphemisms about synergies and market optimization. I confirmed the meeting, curious about this alternative approach. Catherine Meridian proved to be everything her reputation suggested: sharp, straightforward, and strategic. In her early 50s, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had navigated male-dominated financial sectors without compromising her principles. Campbell will offer you a clean exit, she stated after preliminary pleasantries. One-time payment, golden handcuffs, and gradual erasure of everything that makes your brand distinctive. Within 3 years, Hearth and Home will be reduced to a label on mass-produced products that bear little resemblance to your creation. You're not big on subtle sales pitches, I observed, appreciating her candor. She smiled briefly. I respect your time and intelligence too much for corporate theater. What I'm building is different. A collective of premium brands that maintain their identities while benefiting from shared resources and infrastructure. A holding company approach rather than absorption. Precisely. Founders remain involved, brands retain their unique positions, and consumers continue connecting with authentic products rather than corporate approximations. She paused, studying me. But perhaps more relevant to your specific situation, we value what established brands often overlook: the importance of founder vision and the power of values-driven commerce. You've researched me, I noted, unsurprised. Of course. Your journey from garage startup to industry disruptor while navigating a complex personal situation demonstrates exactly the resilience and innovation I seek in partners. She leaned forward slightly. Campbell sees a successful product line to acquire. I see a visionary founder whose story has only begun its second chapter. The conversation continued, covering specific terms, integration approaches, and growth strategies. Unlike typical acquisition discussions focused on cost-cutting and rationalization, Catherine emphasized expansion opportunities and brand evolution. Most strikingly, she proposed a structure that would allow me to retain significant equity and creative control while accessing Meridian's resources for accelerated growth. Take time to consider both offers, she advised as our meeting concluded. Compare not just the financial terms, but the futures they represent for what you've built. The contrast became even more apparent the following week when I met with Campbell's acquisition team. Their presentation was polished but predictable: market share projections, distribution efficiencies, absorption timelines. The financial offer was slightly higher than Meridian's, but the underlying message was clear. They were buying Hearth and Home to eliminate competition and access our customer base, not to nurture our distinct approach. Your personal brand story has been quite effective for a regional operation, their marketing director commented, her smile not reaching her eyes. We'd maintain elements of that narrative during the transition period. And after the transition? I asked. We find consumers connect more with product benefits than founder stories long-term, she replied smoothly. Our research shows diminishing returns on personal narrative after initial brand establishment. The subtext was unmistakable. My story, the very journey that had resonated with our customers and defined our authentic approach, was viewed as a temporary marketing asset rather than the company's foundational ethos. As I drove back to our Riverview Tower, after the meeting, I found myself reflecting on how thoroughly Daniel's dismissal of my initial business concept had shaped my path. His inability to see value in what I was creating had ultimately pushed me to prove its worth, not just to him, but to myself and the marketplace. Now, ironically, that value was significant enough to attract corporate buyers who saw dollar signs where Daniel had seen only a hobby. In my office above the flagship store, I reviewed both acquisition proposals side by side, evaluating them not just as business opportunities, but as potential legacies. The Campbell offer represented a clean exit, financial security, and the freedom to pursue new ventures or simply enjoy the fruits of my labor. The Meridian proposal offered partnership rather than exit, continuing the journey with enhanced resources while maintaining the brand's integrity. I called Jen, whose experience with business transitions made her perspective invaluable. "The question isn't which offer is better," she said after I'd summarized both proposals. "It's what you want for the next phase of your life. Are you ready to close this chapter, or are you still writing it?" Her framework clarified my thinking. While the Campbell acquisition would represent vindication in the most conventional sense, a significant financial payout proving the value of what Daniel had mocked, it would also mean surrendering control of my creation at its moment of greatest potential. The Meridian partnership, though less lucrative in immediate terms, preserved my connection to what I'd built while providing resources for expansion. The decision crystallized with unexpected clarity. I wasn't finished with Hearth and Home. The company's journey, and my own, had more chapters to write. I drafted responses to both suitors, declining Campbell's offer while expressing interest in further discussions with Meridian. The choice felt right, not because it promised greater financial returns long-term, though it might, but because it aligned with my values and vision for the company's future. As I prepared to leave that evening, Olivia knocked on my office door, expression unusually hesitant. "Do you have a moment? There's something I need to tell you." "Of course. Everything okay?" She sat down, fidgeting slightly. "I received a job offer, creative director position with a national home goods brand." My stomach tightened. After investing in her development and watching her grow into a valuable team member, losing her would be a significant blow. "That's a great opportunity. Which company?" "Olivia Palmer Designs." She looked up, a nervous smile forming. My own. Meridian Brands approached me about launching a home textile line under their portfolio. Bedding, throws, bath linens, designs inspired by our seasonal collections here, but in complementary categories. I stared at her, processing this unexpected development. "You're launching your own brand with Meridian's backing?" She nodded. "Catherine contacted me last week after touring our store. She said Hearth and Home's visual aesthetic had significant potential for expansion into soft goods, and my background in fashion design combined with what I've learned here made me an ideal founder for a complementary brand in their portfolio." The pieces suddenly connected. Meridian wasn't just interested in acquiring Hearth and Home. They were building an ecosystem of related brands with coordinated aesthetics and values. My company would be the fragrance and ambiance cornerstone, while Olivia's new venture would extend the sensory experience through textiles. "That's actually brilliant," I admitted, genuine excitement replacing my initial concern. "Our customers already want to immerse themselves in the environments we create through scent. Extending that experience through complementary textiles is a natural evolution." Relief washed over Olivia's features. "So, you're not upset? I was worried you'd feel I was being disloyal or competitive." "Quite the opposite. I'm proud of you." And I realized I genuinely was. The woman who had once represented everything I'd lost had transformed into something unexpected. a colleague whose journey had paralleled my own in surprising ways. Though I'm curious, why did Catherine approach you directly? Olivia hesitated. She said she recognized a pattern. Women with genuine talent whose potential had been undermined by men who claimed to support them while actually limiting their growth. She met my gaze directly. She mentioned your history with Daniel and mine, said she makes a point of watching for that pattern in various industries. The observation was astute and surprisingly personal for a business strategy. It suggested Catherine Meridian's vision extended beyond financial returns to something more meaningful, identifying and elevating female entrepreneurs who had been underestimated. The next morning, I called Catherine to accept her partnership, proposal for Hearth and Home, and to discuss Olivia's new venture. Her response confirmed my suspicions about her broader strategy. "I'm building something more significant than a brand portfolio," she explained. "I'm creating a community of complementary businesses led by women who understand both creation and resilience. The financial potential is substantial, but the model itself, successful female founders supporting each other's growth rather than competing for limited recognition, that's the true innovation." As we finalized terms over the following weeks, the vision became increasingly compelling. Hearth and Home would maintain its identity and independence while gaining resources for international expansion. Olivia Palmer Designs would launch with coordinating collections that complemented our seasonal themes. 3 other female-founded brands in Meridian's portfolio would align their product development calendars to create comprehensive lifestyle collections with shared aesthetic and values. The partnership formalization coincided with Hearth and Home's 4th anniversary, a milestone that prompted reflection on the journey from garage startup to nationally recognized brand. To celebrate, we hosted a rooftop garden reception at Riverview, tower for employees, key clients, and partners. The space had transformed beautifully, with flowering plants surrounding comfortable seating areas and string lights creating a warm glow as evening approached. As I surveyed the gathering, Emma directing her team with quiet efficiency, Olivia showing her textile prototypes to interested guests, Sam describing our sustainable manufacturing processes to new partners, I felt a profound sense of achievement that transcended the original motivation of proving Daniel wrong. Jen joined me at the railing, champagne in hand. "You've built something exceptional here. Not just the products or the brand, but the community around it." "We've built something," I corrected. "I wouldn't be here without your initial belief in what was possible. You had the vision. I just provided resources and occasional blunt feedback." She gestured toward the thriving garden and gathered people. "This is what success actually looks like. Creation rather than competition, growth rather than grievance." She was right. Somewhere along the journey, my purpose had transformed from reactive to generative. What had begun as determination to prove my ex-husband wrong had evolved into something far more meaningful, building a business that reflected my values, supported a growing team, and connected with customers seeking both beauty and responsibility in their lives. Daniel's mockery, once so central to my motivation, had receded to historical footnote rather than driving force. The building his company had vacated now housed innovative businesses aligned with our community vision. The woman he had chosen over me had found her own path to creative fulfillment, separate from his influence. And the business he had dismissed as a hobby was partnering with a visionary investment group to expand internationally. The symmetry was satisfying, but it no longer defined my story. I had moved beyond the narrative of the wronged wife, proving her worth to the ex-husband who underestimated her. The new chapters were about expansion rather than vindication, creation rather than reaction, possibility rather than resentment. As the celebration continued around me, I reflected on how thoroughly my perspective had shifted. Success wasn't owning the building where Daniel had once worked, or surpassing the girlfriend he had supported instead of me. True success was creating something meaningful that reflected my values and provided opportunities for others to grow alongside me. The revenge narrative had been compelling in its simplicity. Wronged woman proves dismissive husband wrong. But the reality had evolved into something far richer and more satisfying. Woman builds flourishing business that long outlasts the relationship that initially motivated her. That was a story worth continuing, with chapters yet to be written. That had nothing to do with the man who had once mocked my dreams. Tomorrow would bring meetings about international expansion, product development for new markets, and coordination with Olivia's textile line. The focus would be forward-looking, possibilities rather than past vindication. And in that shift lay the most profound success of all: the freedom to define my future on my own terms, unconstrained by the need to prove anything to anyone but myself. 5 years into Hearth & Home's partnership with Meridian Brands, I found myself in an unfamiliar position, being interviewed for a cover feature in Business Innovation magazine. The photographer arranged me near the floor-to-ceiling windows of our headquarters, now occupying 3 full floors of Riverview Tower, with the Oak Ridge skyline creating a dramatic backdrop. "Just one more set," the photographer called, adjusting his equipment. "Maybe with some of your signature products in the frame?" Emma, who had been promoted to Chief Operating Officer 2 years earlier, was already arranging our latest collection on the minimalist desk. Elegant glass vessels containing our award-winning fragrances, the sustainable packaging that had become an industry standard, and the leather-bound product development journal I still used for sketching new concepts. "Perfect," the photographer murmured, capturing a series of shots that would accompany the magazine's Visionaries issue. When the photo session concluded, the journalist, a thoughtful woman named Marina who had been following our company's growth for several years, settled into the seating area for our final interview. "The expansion into European markets has exceeded industry projections," she noted, reviewing her research. 12 countries in 18 months is aggressive even for established brands. "We had excellent regional partners," I explained. "And our sustainability standards actually gave us an advantage in markets with stricter regulations. While competitors were reformulating to meet requirements, we were already compliant." "That's become something of a pattern with Hearth and Home," Marina observed, anticipating market shifts rather than reacting to them. "The plastic-free packaging initiative, the regenerative agriculture partnerships for botanical ingredients, the carbon-neutral manufacturing facility in Colorado, all implemented before they became industry talking points." I smiled, recognizing her gentle probe for the secret behind our consistent foresight. We didn't start with market analysis or competitive positioning. We started with values and worked backward to create products that embodied them. As consumer priorities evolved toward those same values, we found ourselves naturally aligned with where the market was heading. "Values-first business model," Marina made notes on her tablet. "Let's shift to the Meridian partnership. 5 years in, how has that relationship evolved?" This question required more careful consideration. The initial structure has proven remarkably durable. Catherine's vision of complementary brands maintaining distinct identities while sharing resources has created efficiencies without sacrificing authenticity. Our international expansion wouldn't have been possible without Meridian's infrastructure, but the products and brand experience remained distinctly Hearth & Home. And the brand collective approach? Olivia Palmer Designs, Terra Ceramics, Lumen Lighting, all launching complementary seasonal collections alongside your fragrances? That's been transformative, I acknowledged. Customers can now create complete sensory environments with products that share aesthetic and ethical alignment. What began as coordinated product launches has evolved into a lifestyle ecosystem with Hearth & Home's fragrance philosophy as its foundation. Marina nodded, then shifted to a more personal direction. "You're known for mentoring female entrepreneurs, particularly those recovering from professional setbacks or undermining partnerships. What drives that focus?" The question touched on something I rarely discussed in business contexts: the emotional foundation beneath the business strategies. But the visionaries issue was meant to explore the human element behind successful innovations. And my journey had certainly been shaped by personal experience. I know what it's like to have your potential dismissed by someone who should be supporting you, I said carefully. And I know the determination that can emerge from that experience. There's tremendous untapped talent in women who've been told their ideas aren't viable or their ambitions aren't realistic. Creating pathways for that talent isn't just socially responsible, it's good business. Is that perspective connected to your early experiences trying to launch Hearth and Home during your marriage? So she'd done her research beyond the standard press materials. I considered deflecting, but opted for measured honesty instead. Yes, my ex-husband viewed my initial business concept as a hobby rather than a viable enterprise. That dismissal became powerful motivation to prove otherwise. What I discovered along the way was that my experience wasn't unique. Many successful women entrepreneurs have similar stories of being underestimated by partners, mentors, or financial gatekeepers. Which led to your collaboration with Catherine Meridian and the female founder focus within your company? Exactly. Catherine recognized the pattern and built an investment strategy around identifying women whose business vision had been undervalued. Within Hearth and Home, we've created development pathways specifically designed to nurture female talent that might be overlooked in traditional corporate structures. The conversation continued, covering our technological innovations in scent development, the artisan apprenticeship program we'd established for sustainable production techniques, and our unconventional approach to retail spaces that blended experiential elements with traditional shopping. As Marina gathered her notes to leave, she asked one final question. What's next for Hearth and Home, and for you personally? After building this success story, do you see yourself stepping back or pushing into new territory? It was the question. I'd been contemplating myself lately. The international expansion had demanded intense focus, with frequent travel and constant decision-making across multiple time zones. The company had grown from my personal vision to a global enterprise with hundreds of employees and a complex operational structure. Success had brought opportunities I'd never imagined when measuring wax flakes in my garage, but also challenges that tested my evolving relationship with the company I'd founded. We're entering a phase of thoughtful consolidation, I answered. Strengthening our presence in existing markets rather than rapid expansion into new ones. Deepening our sustainability commitments through regenerative sourcing rather than simply maintaining current standards. As for me personally, I paused, articulating something I hadn't yet shared publicly. I'm exploring ways to extend our impact beyond consumer products into education and entrepreneurial support, particularly for women facing the barriers I encountered early in my journey. After Marina departed, I remained by the windows, watching sunset transform the Oak Ridge skyline. The Riverview Tower, once significant as the building where Daniel worked, then as property I partially owned, had evolved into something different. The headquarters of a business collective redefining industry standards for ethical luxury. The symbolic victory of owning my ex-husband's workplace had long since been eclipsed by the substantive achievement of building something meaningful and enduring. My phone chimed with a message from Jen. Dinner tonight to celebrate your magazine. Cover? Harborview at 8? Perfect, I replied. Inviting Catherine too. She's in town for the quarterly review. Our regular dinners had become something of a tradition, moments to step back from operational details and reflect on broader vision and strategy. With Jen's wellness company, now expanded to 50 locations nationwide, and Catherine's Meridian brands recognized as a pioneering force in female-led business collectives, our conversations had evolved from tactical business advice to philosophical discussions about reshaping industries around value-centered commerce. Later that evening, as we settled into our usual corner table with its panoramic view of the harbor, Catherine raised her glass in a toast. To the Business Innovation Cover, well-deserved recognition for genuine industry disruption. I smiled, accepting the acknowledgement but feeling a familiar discomfort with personal accolades. The timing is fortunate for our European expansion. The visibility should help with retail partnerships in newer markets. Always the strategist, Jen laughed. Can't just enjoy the moment without calculating its business application. Speaking of strategy, Catherine set down her glass, expression turning thoughtful. Have you given more consideration to the foundation concept we discussed last quarter? The question referenced an idea that had been taking shape in recent months. Establishing an independent foundation focused on female entrepreneurship, particularly for women recovering from undermining partnerships or professional setbacks. The concept would formalize and expand the mentoring work I'd been doing informally while creating structured pathways for investment, education, and support. I've been developing the framework, I admitted. Initial funding, governance structure, program design. It feels like the right evolution, taking the lessons from Hearth and Home's journey and creating systems to support other women facing similar challenges. Have you settled on a name? Jen asked. Phoenix Foundation, I replied, having finally decided after weeks of consideration. For women rising from the ashes of undermining situations to build something stronger than before. Perfect, Catherine nodded approvingly. Transforming personal setback into productive purpose. That's been the through line of your journey since the beginning. As our conversation continued, touching on operational details, potential board members, and initial program focus, I felt a sense of rightness about this new direction. The foundation represented something I hadn't anticipated when starting. Hearth and Home. The opportunity to transform my personal experience into systemic change that might benefit countless women facing versions of what I'd encountered. The following morning, I arrived at Riverview Tower earlier than usual, taking time to walk through our retail space before the day's meetings began. The flagship store had evolved significantly from its initial concept, now featuring dedicated areas for home fragrance, bath and body care, and textile collaborations with Olivia Palmer Designs. Interactive elements allowed customers to create custom scent profiles, while educational displays highlighted our regenerative sourcing practices and artisan partnerships. Olivia herself appeared from the design studio we'd established adjacent to the retail floor, carrying fabric swatches for the upcoming seasonal collection. Perfect timing, she called, spreading the samples across the consultation table. I'm finalizing the winter textiles and wanted your input on coordinating with the fragrance notes. Our professional relationship had developed into something neither of us could have imagined during the complicated days of my marriage to Daniel, a creative partnership built on mutual respect and complementary skills. Olivia's textile designs perfectly extended the sensory environments created by our fragrance concepts, while our established market presence had provided the platform for her creativity to reach appreciative customers. The alpine forest fragrance needs something with texture, I suggested, examining her proposed fabrics. Maybe the brushed wool in that deep spruce color? It captures the same grounding, peaceful quality as the cedarwood and pine notes. She nodded, making notes. And for the winter spice collection, I'm torn between the rich amber velvet and this more subtle herringbone. Layer them, I suggested. The velvet for accent pieces, the herringbone for larger applications. It creates the same complexity as the fragrance profile, bold notes supported by subtle undertones. As we continued discussing the seasonal collection, I reflected on how thoroughly our professional identities had been reshaped. Both of us had originally been defined in relation to Daniel, me as the wife whose business ambitions he dismissed, Olivia as the girlfriend whose fashion career he superficially supported. Now we collaborated as successful entrepreneurs whose creative visions had long since outgrown those limiting relationships. Have you heard from Daniel recently? Olivia asked suddenly, as if sensing the direction of my thoughts. The question surprised me. We rarely discussed him, having moved beyond that shared history to more productive territory. Not directly, I admitted. I heard through industry connections that he left Pinnacle about a year ago. Apparently, he's with a smaller regional firm now. Somewhere in the Midwest, I think. She nodded, unsurprised. He reached out last month. Wanted to reconnect. Implied he'd been following our success from afar. And? I didn't respond. She gathered her fabric samples methodically. There's nothing there for me anymore. Whatever validation I once sought from his approval seems ridiculous now, knowing what I've built independently. Her words resonated with my own journey, the gradual shift from seeking external validation to finding confidence in creation and impact. Daniel's opinion, once so central to my self-perception, had become irrelevant to my identity or purpose. The foundation announcement goes out next week, I mentioned, changing the subject. I'd like you to consider joining the advisory board. Your experience with both sides of the undermining partnership dynamic would be valuable to the women we'll be supporting. Olivia looked up, genuinely touched. I'd be honored, though I sometimes forget we were ever on opposite sides of that situation. That's perhaps the most unexpected outcome of this entire journey, I acknowledged with a smile, finding alliance where antagonism once seemed inevitable. Our morning strategy meeting brought together the expanded leadership team, Emma handling operations, Sam overseeing production and sustainability initiatives, Olivia directing design collaborations, and several newer executives managing international markets, digital experience, and educational outreach. The growth from our original 3-person operation to this diverse, specialized team reflected both our business success and the evolution of our organizational priorities. European market penetration continues ahead of projections, reported Marta, our International Markets Director. The Scandinavian expansion has been particularly strong, with sustainability credentials driving retailer interest and consumer loyalty. The Regenerative Farming Initiative has secured 3 new partner collectives, Sam added. We are now sourcing 85% of botanical ingredients from regenerative agriculture systems, with plans to reach 100% by next fiscal year. As the updates continued, reflecting solid progress across all divisions, I found myself increasingly drawn to the foundation plans taking shape separately from these operational details. While Hearth and Home continued its successful trajectory under the team's capable leadership, my personal energy was shifting toward the systemic challenges facing women entrepreneurs, particularly those whose vision had been undermined by partners who should have supported them. After the meeting, I shared these thoughts with Emma during our weekly one-on-one session. I'm thinking about transitioning to an executive chairperson role, I admitted. Maintaining strategic oversight of Hearth and Home while focusing more actively on launching the Phoenix Foundation. Emma nodded thoughtfully. The timing makes sense. The company has strong momentum, established systems, and a capable leadership team. And the foundation represents an evolution of your personal mission, rather than a departure from it. Exactly. Taking the lessons from building Hearth and Home and creating pathways for other women to navigate similar journeys. I hesitated, before asking, would you be interested in stepping into the CEO position? Her surprise was evident, but quickly gave way to thoughtful consideration. I'd want to discuss transition planning, ongoing division of responsibilities, and how we'd manage the relationship between the company and the foundation. But fundamentally, yes, I'd be honored to lead the next phase of Hearth and Home's growth. The conversation continued, exploring how this leadership evolution might unfold over the coming year, maintaining continuity while creating space for fresh perspectives. By the time we concluded, a clear transition framework had taken shape, one that would allow me to shift focus toward the foundation while ensuring Hearth and Home continued thriving under Emma's direction. That afternoon, I had a scheduled call with George Martinez, the bank officer who had rejected my first business loan application years earlier and who now competed aggressively for our banking business. Rebecca, always a pleasure, he greeted me warmly. I've been reviewing the prospectus for the Phoenix Foundation. Impressive vision, addressing systemic barriers for female entrepreneurs through combined financial, educational, and mentorship support. Thank you, George. We're particularly focused on women whose business concepts have been dismissed by partners or traditional funding gatekeepers. The irony of discussing this with someone who had once been precisely such a gatekeeper wasn't lost on either of us. A personal passion area, I imagine, he acknowledged diplomatically. The bank would be interested in discussing a significant contribution to the foundation's initial funding, particularly the low-interest loan program for qualifying entrepreneurs. That's generous. What prompted the interest? His hesitation was brief but noticeable. Beyond the obvious community benefit and alignment with our diversity initiatives, let's just say I've learned the costly lesson of underestimating visionary women with non-traditional business concepts. The interest Oak Ridge National missed by declining your initial loan application has been educational for our lending practices. I smiled at this tacit admission. We all evolve in our understanding, George. The foundation is specifically designed to bridge those gaps between visionary concepts and traditional evaluation metrics. After finalizing details for the bank's potential involvement, I headed to my final appointment of the day, a site visit to the property we were considering for the Phoenix Foundation headquarters. Located in a historically overlooked neighborhood that was experiencing community-led revitalization, the former industrial building offered character, accessibility, and alignment with our mission of recognizing overlooked potential. Linda Chen, the commercial property agent who had helped secure our production facility years earlier, met me outside the brick structure. It needs substantial renovation, she cautioned as we entered, but the bones are excellent. Historic tax credits could offset some rehabilitation costs, and the zoning allows for mixed-use development, office space, educational facilities, even small-scale retail or incubator storefronts. Walking through the cavernous main floor with its soaring ceilings, exposed beams, and abundant natural light, I could envision the transformation. Open workspaces for foundation staff, flexible areas for workshops and training programs, private consultation rooms for mentoring sessions, a resource library, perhaps even a small retail showcase for products created by foundation participants. The second floor could accommodate 10 to 12 incubator spaces, Linda continued, leading me upstairs. Emerging entrepreneurs could have dedicated workspaces with shared resources, perfect for women transitioning from home-based businesses to more formal operations. The potential resonated deeply with my own journey from garage production to established enterprise. How many women with viable concepts never made that transition because they lacked resources, encouragement, or legitimizing structures? How many brilliant ideas remained unrealized because their creators had internalized dismissive judgments from partners, family members, or financial gatekeepers? It's perfect, I decided, already mentally arranging programs and resources throughout the space. Let's proceed with due diligence and formal proposal to the foundation board. As we completed the tour, my phone chimed with a news alert. The first public announcement about the Phoenix Foundation had been released to select media outlets, with broader distribution scheduled for the following day. Already, interview requests were coming in from business publications, women's leadership forums, and entrepreneurial podcasts, all interested in the foundation's mission and my personal journey from undermined spouse to successful founder. That evening, as I reviewed the coverage from my downtown apartment, a particular quote from the press release stood out. The Phoenix Foundation transforms personal setback into collective advancement, creating pathways for women to rise from the ashes of undermining relationships and build enterprises stronger than what was lost. The language captured exactly what I hoped to accomplish, not just supporting individual entrepreneurs, but changing systemic patterns that diminished women's business potential. The vision extended far beyond my personal experience with Daniel. addressing cultural and institutional barriers that countless women encountered when pursuing entrepreneurial ambitions. A text arrived from Catherine. Statement is perfect. Would love to discuss potential Meridian partnership with the foundation when you're ready. Then another from Jen. Watched 3 different business channels cover the announcement. You've touched a nerve. They're calling it a movement, rather than just another foundation. The response was validating but not surprising. The issue resonated because it was so pervasive. Women whose vision had been dismissed by partners who should have been their strongest supporters. The foundation would provide practical resources, certainly, but perhaps more importantly, it would challenge the narrative that such dismissal reflected accurate assessment rather than gendered bias. A final message arrived from an unknown number. Congratulations on the foundation announcement. Your success continues to inspire. Would welcome the opportunity to reconnect. Daniel. I stared at the text, surprised by the unexpected contact after years of silence. There was no anger in my reaction, no lingering resentment or desire for acknowledgement, just mild curiosity about what could possibly motivate him to reach out now, and certainty that whatever he sought held no relevance to my current life or purpose. After brief consideration, I deleted the message without responding. Our chapter had closed years ago, superseded by a story far more significant than the dynamic between former spouses. Whatever recognition or reconciliation he might seek would add nothing to the journey that had carried me from garage entrepreneur to industry innovator to foundation creator. The following morning brought the formal announcement of my transition to executive chairperson of Hearth & Home and Emma's promotion to CEO, coordinated with broader media coverage of the Phoenix Foundation launch. The business press framed the moves as strategic evolution rather than departure, expanding impact beyond consumer products into systemic change while ensuring continued innovation within the established brand. As I prepared for a series of interviews about both announcements, Tom Wilson called with news about Riverview Tower. The international investors are considering divesting their real estate holdings in secondary markets, he explained. They've received an attractive offer for their ownership stake in the building. From whom? I asked, surprised by the development. Meridian Properties, Catherine's real estate division. She's interested in consolidating ownership and implementing more extensive sustainability renovations. The rooftop garden concept would expand to vertical farming elements, solar integration, and gray water recycling systems. The prospect was intriguing, transforming the conventional office tower into a model of urban sustainability, with Hearth & Home remaining as anchor tenant and our complementary brands occupying additional floors. The building that had once symbolized corporate conventionality would become physical embodiment of the values-centered business approach we'd pioneered. I'm supportive in principle, I told Tom. Let's review the formal proposal when it's available. This conversation was still on my mind that afternoon as I stood in the empty industrial building that would become Phoenix Foundation headquarters, surveying the space with architects and program directors. The contrast between this raw, character-filled structure and the sleek corporate environment of Riverview Tower reflected the evolution of my own journey. From seeking legitimacy within conventional business frameworks to creating entirely new models based on different values and metrics. We'll maintain the industrial elements while creating warmth through natural materials, the lead architect explained, gesturing toward the exposed brick walls and timber beams. The central atrium will feature a living wall irrigated with recycled water, symbolizing growth from fundamental elements. And this area will showcase products created by foundation participants, added the program director, indicating a light-filled corner space. Rotating exhibitions will highlight different entrepreneurs each month, providing visibility and market feedback while they develop their concepts. As plans took shape around me, I felt the same creative energy that had fueled Hearth & Home's early days, the excitement of building something meaningful from foundational values rather than conventional templates. The Phoenix Foundation would extend that approach beyond consumer products into institutional change, addressing root causes rather than symptoms of gender disparity in entrepreneurship. My phone vibrated with an incoming call from Catherine, likely regarding the Riverview Tower proposal. Before answering, I took a final moment to absorb the potential of the space around me, not just as physical headquarters, but as manifestation of a vision that had evolved far beyond anything I could have imagined when mixing my first candle formulations in a suburban garage. The journey from dismissed spouse to successful founder to systemic change agent hadn't followed any predictable path. Each phase had emerged organically from the previous one, building toward impact that transcended personal vindication to address collective opportunity. While Daniel's mockery had provided initial motivation, the sustaining force had become something far more powerful: the recognition that my experience reflected broader patterns limiting women's entrepreneurial potential, and the determination to transform that recognition into meaningful change. As I answered Catherine's call to discuss next steps for both the foundation and the building acquisition, I carried that awareness with me. That true success wasn't measured by proving former doubters wrong, but by creating pathways for others to move beyond similar limitations toward their own authentic visions. The office building that had once represented symbolic victory had become merely one asset in a much larger mission. And the business that began as response to dismissal had evolved into a platform for transforming how female entrepreneurs were valued, supported, and empowered to bring their unique visions to reality. 10 years after founding Hearth and Home from my garage, I stood at the podium in the Phoenix Foundation's Central Hall, surveying the crowd gathered for our second annual Women's Enterprise Summit. The converted industrial space had transformed wonderfully. Exposed brick walls softened by living greenery, original timber beams contrasting with modern lighting, and flexible areas filled with displays from women entrepreneurs at various stages of their journeys. "Welcome," I began, feeling the familiar mixture of excitement and purpose that these gatherings inspired. What started last year as an experiment has become a movement. Today, we have participants from 27 states and 12 countries, all united by a common experience: having their business vision initially dismissed by someone who should have supported it, and finding the determination to prove that assessment wrong. The audience nodded in recognition. These were women who understood the journey intimately: fashion designers whose husbands had called their work expensive hobbies, tech innovators whose partners had questioned their technical understanding, food entrepreneurs whose family members had dismissed their concepts as impractical dreams. The Phoenix Foundation exists because of a simple truth I discovered through my own experience. The moment someone underestimates your potential can become the most powerful catalyst for achieving it. Not to prove them wrong, though that has its satisfactions. Appreciative laughter rippled through the room, but because their dismissal forces you to find conviction within yourself that transcends external validation. For the next hour, I shared the Foundation's progress. 57 businesses launched through our incubator program, $12 million in low-interest loans distributed to qualifying entrepreneurs, mentorship relationships established with industry leaders across multiple sectors, and policy initiatives addressing structural barriers faced by women in business ownership. But numbers tell only part of the story, I continued. The real impact happens in individual journeys from dismissal to determination to success, which is why today's summit focuses on personal narratives that illuminate common patterns and strategies. As I introduced the day's first speaker, a biochemist whose skincare innovations had been repeatedly rejected by male investors before securing female-led venture capital, I noticed Catherine Meridian slipping into the back of the hall. Her presence wasn't surprising given her role as a Foundation board member, but her timing was unexpected. Our scheduled meeting wasn't until later that afternoon to discuss expanding the Meridian Collective's partnership with Foundation graduates. The morning unfolded with powerful presentations from women whose businesses spanned diverse industries: sustainable fashion, educational technology, urban agriculture, specialized manufacturing. Despite their different backgrounds and sectors, common themes emerged in their stories. The initial dismissal of their concepts, the struggle to secure resources without traditional support, the strategic pivots necessitated by limited capital, and the eventual validation of their vision through market success. During the lunch break, Catherine found me in the Foundation's private meeting room, where I was reviewing notes for my afternoon workshop on navigating investor conversations. "Sorry to interrupt your preparation," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "But there's a development you should know about before it becomes public." Something in her tone caught my attention. Catherine wasn't given to dramatic announcements or unnecessary urgency. "What's happening?" "Pinnacle Financial is being acquired by North Star Holdings. The announcement goes out tomorrow morning." The news was surprising but not immediately significant to my current concerns. Pinnacle, once so central to my narrative as Daniel's employer and tenant in the building I partially owned, had receded into background relevance as both Hearth and Home and the Phoenix Foundation had evolved. Interesting, but why the personal heads up? Catherine's expression remained carefully neutral. "Because Daniel Mitchell is North Star's chief acquisition officer. He engineered the Pinnacle purchase as part of their regional expansion strategy." That was unexpected. Last I'd heard, Daniel had been working at a mid-sized firm in the Midwest, having never regained the career momentum he'd lost after the Olivia situation and subsequent transfer. This apparent professional resurgence was surprising. "I see," I replied, processing this information. "That explains his text a couple years ago attempting to reconnect. He was already planning this move." "Most likely," Catherine agreed. "North Star has been implementing an aggressive acquisition strategy in secondary markets. The Pinnacle purchase gives them significant presence in Oak Ridge, including office space in Riverview Tower," I noted, seeing the connection to my current interests. "Which Meridian Properties now owns entirely." "Exactly." Catherine leaned forward slightly. "They'll be your tenant again, or more precisely, Meridian's tenant. I wanted you to hear it from me before reading it in tomorrow's business headlines." I considered this development, searching my reaction for any lingering emotional response. There was none. No anxiety, no vindictive satisfaction, not even particular interest beyond the practical implications for the building's tenant mix. "Thank you for letting me know," I said sincerely. "Though, honestly, it doesn't really affect anything. Daniel's career movements stopped being relevant to my life years ago." Catherine studied me, apparently satisfied with what she observed. "I thought that would be your response, but felt you deserved direct communication given the history. Professional courtesy among board members," she added with a slight smile. "Appreciated. Now let's talk about something that actually matters: the potential partnership between Meridian's Sustainable Textiles division and Jenna Rodriguez's innovative fiber processing technology. Her presentation yesterday at the Incubator Review was impressive." Catherine nodded, transitioning smoothly to business that felt genuinely meaningful. As we discussed potential collaboration between Meridian and one of our most promising foundation entrepreneurs, I realized how completely my focus had shifted from personal vindication to systemic change. Daniel's return to Oak Ridge's business landscape registered as a minor footnote rather than significant plot development in my story. After Catherine departed, I had a few moments alone before the afternoon sessions resumed. Reflecting on the news, I felt a certain symmetry to Daniel's career trajectory, rising at Pinnacle, falling after the situation with Olivia and me, and now apparently ascending again in a new corporate context. Whatever ambition had driven him to dismiss my early business efforts clearly remained intact, though now operating in different circumstances. The afternoon workshop on investor conversations went exceptionally well, with participants practicing responses to the subtle and not-so-subtle gender biases still prevalent in funding discussions. As we role-played scenarios drawn from actual experiences, I found myself energized by the women's growing confidence in articulating their value, propositions, and challenging flawed assumptions. Remember, when an investor questions whether your business is just a hobby, they're revealing more about their limited perspective than your potential, I explained, addressing a common experience among participants. The appropriate response isn't defensiveness, but clear articulation of market validation, growth metrics, and execution capability. As the day concluded with networking sessions and showcases for foundation-supported businesses, I spotted Elena Davis, a recent program graduate whose innovative childcare scheduling platform had secured significant seed funding, deep in conversation with Olivia near the textiles display. "Rebecca!" Elena waved me over enthusiastically. "I was just telling Olivia how your workshop on investor conversations helped me secure my latest funding round. The technique for redirecting hobby business comments to market validation metrics was exactly what I needed." "I'm not surprised," Olivia smiled. "That particular redirection strategy saved my second business launch after the boutique failure. When potential partners questioned my comeback potential, focusing on concrete, design innovations rather than past setbacks completely changed the conversation dynamics." Their exchange perfectly illustrated what made the Phoenix Foundation's approach effective, combining practical strategies with personal narratives that demonstrated recovery from setbacks. Both women had faced dismissal of their business potential. Both had found ways to transform that experience into greater determination, and both were now creating success on their own terms. After the summit concluded, I joined the Foundation's leadership team for our traditional post-event dinner at a local restaurant owned by one of our earliest program graduates. As we discussed highlights from the day's sessions and potential improvements for future events, my phone buzzed with a business news alert. North Star Holdings to acquire Pinnacle Financial Group. Regional expansion led by Chief Acquisition Officer Daniel Mitchell returns former executive to Oak Ridge business community. Several team members noticed the alert appearing on my phone screen, their expressions revealing awareness of my history with Daniel. "Well, that's a plot twist," commented Maya Rodriguez, our programs director who had known me since Hearth and Home's early days. "Not really," I replied honestly. "More like a footnote to a story that moved on long ago. Still, it must feel strange knowing he'll be back in Oak Ridge," pressed Sophia Williams, our newest team member who handled media relations. "The Oak Ridge business community he's returning to is very different from the one he left," I pointed out. "Women-led enterprises have transformed the landscape, particularly in sustainable consumer products and ethical investment. Ironically, Hearth and Home helped create market conditions that make this region attractive for North Star's acquisition strategy." "Full circle moment," Maya observed. "Your success made the market valuable enough for his company to want back in." I hadn't considered that particular irony, but she wasn't wrong. The business ecosystem I'd helped build, first through Hearth and Home's success, then through the Foundation's support of women entrepreneurs, had contributed to making Oak Ridge an attractive market for regional investment. Daniel's return through North Star acquisition represented, in a roundabout way, validation of what he had once dismissed. The following morning, I arrived at the Foundation headquarters early, wanting quiet time to review applications for our next incubator cohort before the day's meetings began. The industrial building felt particularly peaceful in the morning, light, sunshine streaming through the original factory windows to illuminate the reclaimed wood floors and the living wall that served as the space's natural centerpiece. As I settled at my desk with the first application, a promising concept for sustainable packaging alternatives developed by a former corporate executive whose ideas had been repeatedly sidelined by male leadership, my assistant knocked lightly on the open door. "Sorry to interrupt your review time," Tyler said, "but Michael Reynolds is in the reception area asking if you have a few minutes. He says it's regarding the North Star acquisition." Michael Reynolds, Daniel's former boss at Pinnacle, who had eventually supported my position during the building ownership situation. I hadn't seen him in years, though I'd heard he'd taken early retirement from Pinnacle's executive team. "That's unexpected," I replied. "Please show him to the conference room. I'll be there momentarily." Michael looked older, but still carried himself with the confident ease of someone accustomed to executive authority. As we exchanged pleasantries, I wondered what could possibly motivate this visit on the very morning the acquisition announcement had gone public. "I apologize for arriving without an appointment," he began after declining coffee. "But I felt I owed you direct communication given our prior interactions and the current situation." "Regarding North Star's acquisition of Pinnacle?" "Yes, and more specifically, Daniel's role in it." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm no longer bound by Pinnacle confidentiality policies, having retired 2 years ago. What I'm about to share is my personal perspective, for whatever value it might provide." Curiosity piqued, I gestured for him to continue. "Daniel's career hasn't been the upward trajectory he projected after leaving Oak Ridge," Michael explained. "The Buffalo position was essentially a demotion. His subsequent move to a Midwest firm came after Pinnacle made it clear further advancement wasn't forthcoming. The North Star position represents something of a last chance at the executive level. I appreciate the information, but I'm not sure how it concerns me," I replied honestly. "Daniel's career trajectory stopped being relevant to my life years ago." "I understand, but there's more context you should be aware of." Michael hesitated before continuing. "In pursuing the Pinnacle acquisition, Daniel has specifically highlighted his insider knowledge of Oak Ridge's business environment, including particular emphasis on, in his words, leveraging existing relationships for North Star's benefit." The implication became clear. "He's suggesting he has influence with me or Hearth and Home?" Michael nodded. "He's positioned himself to North Star leadership as having unique insight into key Oak Ridge business relationships, including with Hearth and Home, the Meridian Collective, and by extension, the Phoenix Foundation." A familiar feeling surfaced. The mixture of disbelief and clarity that had characterized many interactions with Daniel during our marriage. His capacity for selective reality construction remained apparently intact, creating narratives that served his purposes regardless of their relationship to truth. "That's an interesting representation of our non-existent relationship," I commented dryly. "Indeed, which is why I felt obligated to provide this context before you encountered it through official channels. North Star will likely reach out regarding their tenancy in Riverview Tower and potential partnership opportunities with your various enterprises." "Based on Daniel's supposed relationship leverage?" "Exactly. I believe in transparent business dealings, even when they're uncomfortable. You should know the narrative being constructed before engaging with it." I considered this information thoughtfully. "Thank you, Michael. This is certainly useful context, though not particularly surprising given past patterns." After he departed, I remained in the conference room, reflecting on this unexpected development. Daniel's approach hadn't fundamentally changed. Still, creating narratives that positioned him advantageously regardless of their accuracy. The difference now was that these narratives held no emotional impact for me, just practical considerations for professional boundaries. Later that morning, I received the formal press release about North Star's acquisition of Pinnacle, noting with interest that Daniel was prominently quoted about returning to familiar territory with enhanced perspective and valuable relationships. The carefully worded statement implied continuity and connection that simply didn't exist, at least not with me or my business interests. I forwarded the release to Catherine with a brief note. "Appears Daniel is suggesting relationship leverage with Meridian properties and businesses. Heads up before North Star approaches about Riverview tenancy or other partnership opportunities." Her response came quickly. "Already received outreach. Politely professional response indicating standard new tenant protocols. We'll keep you updated on anything relevant to foundation interests." By mid-afternoon, I had nearly forgotten. The morning's revelation, deeply engaged in reviewing applications and planning the next incubator cohort. The foundation's work felt vibrant and meaningful, creating pathways for women whose business potential had been underestimated or dismissed, exactly as mine had been years earlier. As I finished the final application review, Tyler appeared at my door again. Rebecca, there's a Daniel Mitchell here without an appointment. He's asking if you have a few minutes to reconnect, given the acquisition announcement. The timing was predictable, if somewhat presumptuous. I considered declining, but decided direct conversation might be the cleanest approach to establishing appropriate boundaries moving forward. Please show him to the conference room, I decided, and let him know I have exactly 15 minutes before my next commitment. Daniel looked both familiar and strange as he entered. The same confident posture and carefully maintained appearance that had characterized him during our marriage, yet visibly older, with new lines around his eyes and a certain tightness to his smile that suggested effort rather than ease. "Rebecca," he greeted me with forced warmth. "You look wonderful. The foundation suits you." "Thank you," I replied neutrally. "Congratulations on the North Star position and Pinnacle acquisition. What can I do for you today, Daniel?" My direct approach seemed to momentarily unbalance him. He had likely anticipated either lingering resentment or eager accommodation. My professional neutrality didn't fit either expected script. I wanted to personally reach out, given my return to Oak Ridge in this new capacity, he began, settling into the chair across from me. North Star will be taking over Pinnacle's lease in Riverview Tower, which I understand is now fully owned by Meridian Properties. That's correct. Catherine Meridian handles all property matters directly. I'm sure her team has already provided the standard new tenant information package. He nodded, slightly too quickly. Yes, of course. I've already spoken with her office, but I thought there might be value in reconnecting personally as well, given our history and the potential synergies between our respective organizations. Synergies? I echoed, genuinely curious what he imagined these might be. North Star has significant interest in supporting women's entrepreneurship initiatives, he explained. Part of our community integration strategy involves meaningful partnerships with organizations like the Phoenix Foundation. Your focus on empowering women business owners aligns well with our corporate social responsibility priorities. The irony was almost too perfect. Daniel positioning himself as a champion of women entrepreneurs after having dismissively mocked my own business ambitions throughout our marriage. But beyond the personal irony lay a more practical concern: his apparent belief that our history might facilitate special access or consideration. The Foundation has established partnership protocols, I explained professionally. Our development team evaluates potential corporate relationships based on alignment with our mission, participant benefit potential, and demonstrated commitment to women's entrepreneurship. I'd be happy to have them send you the standard information package. His expression flickered briefly with something like frustration before resettling into pleasant professionalism. Of course, I understand formal processes are necessary, but I was hoping we might discuss a more personalized approach, given our unique background. Our background is precisely why standard processes are particularly important in this case, I replied directly. Any appearance of special access or consideration would undermine the Foundation's integrity and my professional credibility. The message was clear. There would be no leveraging of past relationship, no special access, no shortcuts through established protocols. Daniel seemed momentarily taken aback by this directness, clearly having anticipated a different reception to his overture. "I understand," he said finally, though his tone suggested otherwise. Though I had hoped time might have softened certain perspectives. This isn't about lingering personal issues, Daniel. It's about professional boundaries and organizational integrity. I checked my watch deliberately. I have another meeting in 5 minutes. Was there anything else specific you wanted to discuss? He hesitated, then apparently decided on a different approach. I've followed your success with genuine admiration, Rebecca. What you've built with Hearth and Home and now this foundation, it's remarkable. I may not have appreciated your potential initially, but I've certainly recognized it since. The acknowledgement was likely the closest he could come to admitting his earlier dismissive attitude had been mistaken. In years past, such recognition might have carried emotional significance. Now it felt merely factual, an observation that came far too late to matter personally, though I could acknowledge it professionally. "Thank you," I replied simply. "I appreciate that recognition. Perhaps we could continue this conversation over dinner sometime?" he suggested, apparently interpreting my polite response as openness to further engagement. Catch up properly, outside the constraints of a business meeting? The invitation confirmed my initial assessment. Daniel hadn't fundamentally changed. He still operated from a self-centered perspective that imagined personal connection might serve his professional purposes regardless of context or history. His apparent inability to recognize appropriate boundaries remained intact, along with his tendency to construct narratives that positioned him advantageously. "I don't think that would be appropriate or necessary," I declined firmly. "Our interactions should remain professional, given the potential business relationships between our organizations. Speaking of which, I really do need to prepare for my next meeting." As I showed him out, I noticed several Foundation team members watching with undisguised curiosity. Daniel's visit would undoubtedly generate discussion, particularly among those familiar with our history. Best to address it directly rather than allow speculation to flourish. After he departed, I sent a brief message to the leadership team. Daniel Mitchell visited regarding potential North Star partnership with the Foundation. I've directed him to standard corporate partnership protocols. Please maintain normal evaluation processes if they submit formal inquiry. Any questions or concerns? My door is open. That evening, as I reviewed the day's events from my downtown apartment overlooking the city lights, I reflected on the strange symmetry of Daniel's return to Oak Ridge. 10 years ago, his dismissal of my business ambitions had inadvertently catalyzed the determination that built Hearth and Home. Now he sought to leverage the success that had grown from that dismissal, apparently without recognizing the fundamental disconnection in that approach. My phone chimed with a message from Olivia. "Heard Daniel made an appearance at the Foundation. Today, corporate partnership pretense?" "Exactly," I confirmed, suggesting our history might facilitate special access. "Some patterns never change," she replied. "Though I must admit, there's a certain satisfaction in seeing him seek connection to the success he once dismissed." Her observation captured the strange reversal perfectly. The business he had mocked as a hobby had evolved into an enterprise whose association he now actively sought. The wife whose ambitions he had belittled now ran organizations whose endorsement could benefit his corporate objectives. Yet the most significant aspect wasn't this reversal of positions, but rather how thoroughly my perspective had transformed. A decade ago, Daniel's dismissal had been devastating, then motivating. Now, his apparent recognition carried no particular emotional weight, just practical considerations for professional boundaries. The following morning, I arrived at the Foundation to find an elaborate flower arrangement delivered to the front desk with Daniel's business card. The accompanying note read, "Looking forward to exploring partnership opportunities between North Star and the Phoenix Foundation. Let's continue our conversation soon." I asked Tyler to donate the flowers to the nursing home across the street and responded with a brief professional email. "Thank you for your interest in the Phoenix Foundation's work. As mentioned yesterday, our development team oversees potential corporate partnerships through established evaluation protocols. I've asked them to send you our standard information package outlining partnership categories, commitment requirements, and application procedures. Best regards, Rebecca Mitchell." His response came quickly. "I appreciate the information, though I had hoped for more direct collaboration given our unique connection. Perhaps I could take you to dinner at Harbor View to discuss mutual opportunities, more informally?" The persistence was both predictable and revealing, demonstrating that Daniel still didn't recognize or respect the professional boundaries I'd clearly established. Another clarifying response seemed necessary. To avoid any misunderstanding, Our past personal relationship necessitates strictly professional interactions now. All North Star partnership inquiries must follow standard protocols applied to any corporate entity. There will be no informal discussions or special access channels. I trust this clarity helps establish appropriate expectations moving forward. With that boundary firmly established, I turned my attention to the Foundation's actual priorities, finalizing the next incubator cohort selection, developing new educational resources for women navigating early-stage funding conversations, and expanding our policy advocacy work addressing structural barriers in entrepreneurial financing. During our weekly leadership meeting that afternoon, I addressed Daniel's visit directly, knowing the team was curious about this unexpected connection to my past. Yes, my ex-husband visited yesterday regarding potential North Star partnership. With the Foundation, I confirmed. And yes, he attempted to leverage our past relationship for special consideration. No, that approach didn't work. And yes, he's been directed to standard evaluation protocols like any other corporate entity. Maya laughed appreciatively. The man who mocked your business ambitions now seeking association with your success? That's poetic justice at its finest. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But what matters isn't the personal irony but the professional principle. The Foundation's integrity requires consistent processes regardless of personal history. If North Star genuinely wants to support women entrepreneurs, they'll follow the same protocols as other corporate partners. And if they're just seeking association with the Foundation's reputation without substantive commitment? Sophia asked. Then the evaluation process will reveal that disconnect and will decline the partnership. I smiled slightly. Our standards don't adjust based on personal connection, positive or negative. As the meeting transitioned to operational updates and strategic planning, I felt a deep appreciation for how thoroughly my focus had shifted from personal vindication to systemic impact. The Foundation's work creating pathways for underestimated women entrepreneurs had transcended its origins in my individual experience, becoming something far more significant than response to one man's dismissal. Daniel's return to Oak Ridge represented not a meaningful plot development, but rather confirmation of how completely I'd moved beyond defining my success in relation to his assessment. The validation I once sought from him had been replaced by something far more meaningful: the satisfaction of helping other women transform dismissal into determination, judgment into journey, setback into success. 3 weeks later, I received word that North Star had submitted a formal partnership application through proper channels. The document was professionally prepared, with substantial financial commitment proposed alongside programmatic support for Foundation initiatives. The development team's initial assessment noted alignment with our entry-level corporate partnership requirements, though with limited evidence of deeper engagement with systemic issues facing women entrepreneurs. It's a standard corporate social responsibility approach, Maya explained during our review meeting. Financially generous but conceptually superficial. They're seeking association with our reputation and access to our network rather than substantive engagement with root causes of entrepreneurial gender disparity. Provide the standard feedback, I directed. Acknowledge the financial commitment positively while suggesting specific areas for deeper engagement that would strengthen future proposals. Treat them exactly as we would any other corporate entity with similar application characteristics. The following day, I attended the quarterly meeting of Meridian Properties Advisory Board, where Catherine shared updates on Riverview Tower's sustainability initiatives and tenant relations. North Star had completed their move into the former Pinnacle spaces, implementing extensive renovations to create more contemporary work environments aligned with their corporate branding as innovative financial services provider. Their facilities director has been professional and cooperative, Catherine noted, though Daniel himself has made several attempts to establish more direct communication channels regarding lease terms and building amenities. We've consistently redirected those inquiries through standard property management protocols. I nodded, unsurprised by this parallel to his Foundation approach. Consistent boundaries are important given the history. Thank you for maintaining those appropriate channels. Of course, though I must admit, there's a certain irony to his current position. Catherine allowed herself a rare moment of personal observation. The man who once dismissed your business ambitions now works in a building partially controlled by enterprises you built, seeking partnership with organizations you founded, in a business ecosystem you helped transform. The symmetry was undeniable, though increasingly irrelevant to my present focus and purpose. Daniel's attempts to leverage past connections for current advantage reflected his unchanged perspective on relationships, while my response demonstrated how completely I'd moved beyond defining success in relation to his assessment or approval. That evening, I met Jen for dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant, catching up on personal and professional developments. Her wellness enterprise had recently expanded to its 60th location nationwide, establishing her as a recognized industry leader in mindful health services. Though less directly involved in daily hearth and home operations since my transition to focus on the foundation, she remained my trusted confidant and thought partner. So Daniel's back in town, attempting to leverage your history for business. Advantage, she summarized after I shared recent developments. Some patterns are remarkably persistent. Remarkably, I agreed. Though what's changed completely is how those patterns affect me. 10 years ago, his dismissal was devastating. 5 years ago, proving him wrong felt vindicating. Now, his attempts to associate with what I've built are merely logistical considerations requiring appropriate professional boundaries. Jen smiled, raising her glass slightly. That's the real success story. Not that your business owns your ex-husband's office building, but that this fact has become merely an interesting detail rather than the defining achievement in your journey. Her observation captured perfectly the evolution I'd experienced. The narrative had shifted from personal vindication to broader purpose, from proving someone wrong to creating pathways for others facing similar underestimation. Speaking of interesting details, Jen continued, checking her phone. Have you seen the latest regional business rankings? Hearth and Home was just named one of the top 3 women-led enterprises in the multi-state region, alongside the Meridian Collective and Nature Tech Innovations. I hadn't seen the report, though Emma had mentioned nomination for several industry recognitions in her most recent update. Under her leadership as CEO, Hearth and Home had continued its growth trajectory while maintaining the values-centered approach that had defined its development under my direction. Emma deserves full credit for that recognition, I noted sincerely. Her leadership has taken the company to new levels while preserving its essential character and mission. True, though the foundation you established made that continued evolution possible. Jen studied me thoughtfully. You've created something remarkable, Rebecca. Not just successful businesses, but models for how enterprises can operate differently, prioritizing authentic values while achieving significant financial success. The recognition felt meaningful coming from someone who had supported my journey from its earliest uncertain beginnings. Jen had been the first person to take my business ambitions seriously when Daniel dismissed them as hobby, providing not just financial investment, but the equally crucial belief in possibilities others couldn't yet see. Speaking of models, I transitioned. The Foundation's policy initiative is gaining traction nationally. 3 more state legislatures have introduced bills reflecting our funding equity framework, and the Congressional Committee has requested our testimony for upcoming hearings. As our conversation continued, covering both professional developments and personal reflections, I realized how thoroughly the narrative had evolved from its origins. What had begun as determination to prove one dismissive voice wrong had expanded into multifaceted movement, addressing systemic barriers limiting countless women's entrepreneurial potential. The next morning brought a message from Catherine that North Star had received the Foundation's feedback on their partnership proposal. According to her sources, the development team's assessment, acknowledging financial commitment while suggesting deeper engagement with systemic issues, had triggered internal discussion about their approach to corporate social responsibility. Generally, apparently, your foundation's feedback has prompted broader conversation within North Star about superficial versus substantive community engagement, Catherine noted. Several senior executives are advocating for more meaningful involvement, with organizations addressing root causes rather than symptoms. This ripple effect represented exactly the kind of systemic influence the foundation sought to exercise, not just supporting individual entrepreneurs, but reshaping how institutions approached gender equity in business development. That North Star's internal conversation had emerged from proposal evaluation applying standard protocols rather than special consideration made the impact more meaningful, demonstrating the effectiveness of maintaining appropriate boundaries. Later that week, while reviewing strategic planning documents for the Foundation's international expansion, I received an unexpected message from Michael Reynolds. Thought you might find this interesting. Daniel has been directed by North Star's CEO to focus exclusively on acquisition strategy rather than community partnership development. Apparently, his approach to the Phoenix Foundation raised concerns about appropriate boundaries and representation of relationships. If he contacts you again regarding partnership matters, it would reflect direct contravention of internal directives. The information wasn't surprising, but provided useful context for maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. I thanked Michael for the update, appreciating his continued commitment to transparent business dealings despite the somewhat uncomfortable personal connections involved. As spring transitioned to summer, the Foundation's work continued expanding in scope and impact, launching international mentorship programs in 3 additional countries, developing policy frameworks, addressing capital access disparities for women entrepreneurs, and preparing our largest incubator cohort yet for program participation beginning in the fall. Daniel's return to Oak Ridge had receded to background detail, relevant only in specific operational contexts where professional boundaries needed maintenance. North Star had submitted revised partnership proposal incorporating more substantive engagement with systemic barriers facing women entrepreneurs, which the development team had evaluated positively according to standard protocols. The resulting limited partnership arrangement provided financial support for specific foundation initiatives while establishing clear parameters for organizational engagement. The office building where Daniel now worked, once symbolically significant as representation of reversed fortunes, had evolved into merely one physical location among many where the business ecosystem I'd helped establish operated. The Riverview Tower, like the Foundation headquarters and Hearth and Homes, multiple facilities, represented not personal vindication, but manifestation of values. Centered enterprises changing how business could function. One afternoon, while meeting with Emma to discuss coordination between Hearth and Home's educational initiatives and the Foundation's mentorship programs, she mentioned casually that Daniel had attempted to schedule a meeting with her regarding potential collaborative opportunities between their organizations. I redirected him to our standard corporate engagement process, she noted with slight amusement. He seemed surprised by the consistent boundaries between all your various enterprises. Consistency matters, I replied, appreciating her professional handling of the situation. Hearth and Home's integrity requires the same standards and protocols, applied to any potential corporate partner, regardless of personal history. Of course, Emma agreed, though there is a certain satisfaction in maintaining those boundaries with someone who once dismissed the very possibility of the business existing. She smiled slightly. The company he mocked now operates at scale he never imagined, with standards and processes beyond his influence. Her observation highlighted again the strange symmetry of current circumstances. The business that began in my garage despite Daniel's mockery had evolved into enterprise whose association he now actively sought, yet whose operational integrity prevented the very leverage he attempted to exercise. But the true significance wasn't this ironic reversal. It was the fact that the business had transcended its origins as response to dismissal, becoming independent force for positive change with impact extending far beyond proving one person wrong. Hearth and Home under Emma's leadership, like the My Phoenix Foundation under mine, had evolved beyond reaction to dismissal into generative force, creating new possibilities and pathways. That evening, sitting on the rooftop garden of Riverview Tower during a community event celebrating the building's sustainability initiatives, I watched sunset transform the Oak Ridge skyline. The city had changed significantly in the decades since. I'd first measured wax flakes in my suburban garage, more diverse in its business leadership, more innovative in its sustainability approaches, more supportive of non-traditional entrepreneurs. I'd contributed to that transformation, certainly, first through Hearth and Home's success, and then through the Foundation's systematic approach to addressing barriers facing women entrepreneurs. But the change extended far beyond any individual, enterprise, or initiative, representing collective movement toward more inclusive, sustainable business ecosystem. As twilight deepened, I reflected on the journey that had begun with one man's dismissal of business ambitions he considered mere hobby. That dismissal, painful as it had been, had catalyzed determination that built not just successful enterprise, but pathway for others facing similar underestimation to find their own professional voice and vision. Perhaps that was the most meaningful aspect of ownership. Not that my business now owned my ex-husband's office building, but that the dismissal that had once defined my entrepreneurial motivation had been transformed into foundation supporting countless women navigating their own journeys from limitation to possibility. The true success wasn't measured in reversed positions or vindicated ambitions, but in transformed purpose and expanded impact. The office building, once symbolically significant, had become merely one tangible manifestation of much deeper transformation. From seeking external validation to creating authentic value, from reacting to dismissal to generating opportunity, from proving someone wrong to making something right. And in that evolution lay the most profound success of all, not ownership of physical property, but authorship of my own story, and support for others writing theirs beyond the limitations of others' expectations or judgments. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.